Klaus, a member of the Woodville Mage Corps, froze in stunned silence. The words echoed through the room. "You are dismissed." He was ordered to find out why. Commander Fowl, sitting at his desk, calmly explained that Klaus simply did not understand the absolute power of the magical core. He stated that a mage who only knows how to heal is useless in battle. The commander looked with contempt as Klaus protested, fervently insisting that with his healing art he had made a significant contribution, even creating new spells, and that his abilities were true combat magic. Despair grew. He begged that he only needed to hold on for another 6 months until his younger sister Karen finished the Knight Academy. The commander sneered with contempt and spat. "Klaus is a talentless mage, full of resentment. He should be grateful they took him even for the full term." These cruel words struck Klaus. He froze, eyes wide open and speechless. Sitting down, he turned and walked away. The heavy door of the commander's office closed dully behind him, hiding his face. As he retreated down the corridor, the last angry command from the commander thundered from the room: "Get out." The word talentless would not leave his mind. He recalled the day monsters killed his parents and left him and his sister Karen to survive alone. He joined the Mage Corps so she wouldn't have to fight, and remembered the pure joy when he was accepted, but now that hope was gone. When the day of the summoning came, he joined the Corps and stood before the formation. His name was called Klaus Finley, and it turned out his magical power was the highest in the Corps history, so everyone was filled with great expectations for his future. To determine his affinity, he was ordered to place his hands on a crystal ball. The question hung in the air: would his power manifest as black offensive magic or red supportive magic? As he directed his energy, the sphere became neither black nor red. Instead, it exploded with dazzling golden light, and Commander Fowl, stunned by the unexpected glow, sharply ordered him to pour even more power into the crystal. From this incredible power burst forth 3 completely different magical inclinations: healing, ice, and fire. But this show of strength turned out to be deceptive. He bitterly realized that despite colossal reserves of magic, the only spell he could actually use was the simplest healing one. This limitation defined his career. Commander Fowl publicly announced his appointment, and this stunned the other mages. Klaus was supposed to be sent to the infirmary, although the commander assured everyone that his salary and provisions would be sufficient. After the announcement, he threw a dull, simple cloak at Klaus, and the commander declared that such a talentless person was not worthy of the red or black cloak of a true mage, and this modest garment became proof of his failure. And so, for the next 5 years, this was his reality. He stood alone, looked out the window, and recalled his efforts. He studied how to adapt healing magic for combat, but his ideas were never heard. He belonged to no faction, and was rejected even in the very heart of the community he had joined with such high hopes. He reports his return to the healing room, and a sharp voice of Tamara, the head of the institution, meets him. She demands to know where he has been and orders him to hurry because there is an emergency here. She shows him a patient, her face completely bandaged. A man named Rindami says that a client in the brothel attacked her, and she suffered a terrible burn. Despite first aid given, he fears there will be a scar. Seeing the seriousness of the injury, Klaus agrees to try to heal her. Klaus placed his hand on the woman's face. A complex, glowing, magical symbol blossomed on his palm as he quietly uttered the healing spell. Rindami looks confused. He had never seen such a pattern before, and Klaus addresses the patient, asks if he can hear her, and assures her that she will fully recover. When the light of the spell faded, he told the woman she could open her eyes. Memories of his lonely experiments surfaced, and he realized this was the healing magic he had developed himself, and the woman's eyes widened in amazement when she saw her reflection. She touches her perfectly restored skin. On her face, genuine relief and gratitude. She thanks him. Klaus smiles warmly, knowing in his mind that this moment is what he values most when his magic brings smiles to people. His joy instantly fades when Tamara addresses him directly and admits, although she wanted to remain silent for Commander Fowl's sake, now it is impossible to deny Klaus's healing ability surpasses her own. Nearby, the patient and Rindami celebrate her amazing recovery. Rindami returns to him with a serious look and asks what magic could have caused such an injury. This question awakens a memory. The image of Commander Fowl 5 years ago, drowning in luxury, spending the organization's funds for his own benefit and neglecting his duties. The memories bring Klaus a bitter realization. Now he understands that Commander Fowl was talking about him, supposedly a useless team member. While he worked diligently, Fowl was just having fun, pretending to be interested in his reports and loafing around. Turning back to the healing room, he asks Tamara with a worried expression on his face why the commander called him. Tamara tightly squeezes his hand. Irritation was readable on her face. She says she kept silent for too long while he was being lied to, warns that now any objections will only worsen his situation, and he is being dismissed. When the weight of this news settled, the now recovered patient bows deeply and thanks him for his 5 years of service, and he looks at her with a barely noticeable, painful smile, accepting that his healing magic no longer works within these walls. He turned and walked away. For years, he and Tamara were the only two mages in their neglected apartment who worked tirelessly every night to keep the healing room running. He walks further along the quiet, moonlit streets. A heavy sigh escapes his lips. He sincerely believed that his healing magic would finally be recognized as necessary. He returns home, and the cheerful voice of his sister Karen immediately greets him. She happily says she just got back and is already preparing their dinner. Her lively mood clashes with his gloomy expression. He asks her to sit down and says they need to talk. After explaining what happened, he sits with his head down and apologizes, calling himself a worthless brother. Karen instantly rejects his pity and insists that what he says is not true at all. Her words throw Klaus's mind back through the years. He sees his tireless studies of healing magic, how he downplayed her adventures to defeat beasts, and the countless people he healed as a healer. He also remembers defeats and the patience he failed to keep. Even then, their families thanked him for his efforts until the very end, and this memory weighs on him. Seeing his expression, Karen insists that he has nothing to apologize for and firmly says she always knew he gives his all. She continues, if the previous job didn't suit him, just find another. Klaus only quietly agrees, still doubting. Hundreds of possibilities race through her mind. She asks about the guild and points to the Black Falcon building. She says it can take orders for monster taming because she is sure the guild master, a man named Ursel, will look after it. He expresses doubt, but she quickly interrupts him, and with a radiant smile, assures that everything will be fine. Her smile broadens, and she confidently says without hesitation that her brother is both strong and cool. To put a full stop, she loudly says that she vouches for him. Herself, her unconditional faith momentarily leaves Klaus speechless, and a barely noticeable blush flares on his cheeks. He thinks about how Karen was always there. Tossing her hair back, she resolutely says she will study hard at the Night Academy and asks them to strive. Her encouragement was always his support, even on days when others called him talentless and he felt depressed. His thoughts again drift to the time after his parents' death. It was Karen who found him, and her smile has since become a constant salvation for him. Turning back to reality, he offers to help her in the kitchen. Karen objects, saying he must be tired, but he insists she wants to cook with her, and a warm smile blooms on her face because she knows in her heart he is her son. A quiet moment of shared happiness strengthens his resolve. He wants to build a happy life with Karen, and when night falls over their home, he knows what he must do to achieve it. The next day in the Adventurers Guild, Black Falcon, Guildmaster Ursel could not believe what he heard. Dismissed, he asked loudly. Klaus, he shifts his gaze to Klaus, who is sitting opposite at the table. Ursel admits his foolishness and explains that since Klaus has always used only healing magic, he never paid attention to Klaus's other abilities, then invites him to register with the guild. Stunned Klaus asks if this is a genuine offer. Ursel leaned forward with an ironic smile, as if saying the guild is business, and added that for a problematic type like Klaus, they had prepared a special main registration exam that he would have to pass. He slides the document across the table and explains that whereas before a temporary registration was enough, now a main one is required to receive official requests and have proof of skills. This paper, he says, is exactly for that exam. Klaus takes it, decisively says understood, and thanks him. He agreed to the terms of the guild master Ursula, who explained that the exam was a request for a rank demotion, and that Klaus's rank would be decided when he returned. With a determined smile, Klaus confirmed he understood and immediately set off. He paused for a moment, focused, closed his eyes and folded his hands, decided to act at full power from the very beginning and mentally activated a series of powerful abilities: regeneration for automatic recovery and strengthening, limit break to surpass the body's capabilities, divine awakening and cell rejuvenation. A soft pulse of energy radiated from him. His senses sharpened. He moved into the dense forest. The target was a fire lizard, a creature he had already fought. He was confident he could use his magical senses to find it. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed in the thicket of trees, accompanied by a dull rumble. It had found something. But when he looked closer, he froze. A wave of confusion washed over him. His surprise turned into anxiety. Before him was not a simple fire lizard, but a black giant salamander, a beast of rank AS. He felt its colossal power, far stronger than that of his target, and realized its magic was like a combination of the powers of several people, so he wondered if it was already fighting someone. The destructive might of the monster was obvious. In the clearing below, Klaus saw the aftermath of its attack. The adventurer team lay scattered and broken, and he froze, seeing that only one person remained standing against what he now suspected was an S-class monster. Without hesitation, he sprang into action. As the black salamander's attack was momentarily stopped by an invisible force, Klaus began weaving a spell. A glowing sign shone between his palms, and he decided to use his magic to divert the creature's attention from the sole survivor. He gathers himself, sees the colossal size of the creature, but inside burns confidence. All the healing magic training he had prepared to defeat monsters had readied him for this moment, and he rushed forward, closing the distance to the beast. Reaching the monster, he strikes its skin with his palms. A shining magical symbol flares under his hands. He directs his power straight into the creature's blood to instantly cool the body and freeze it from within. The effect is immediate and brutal. Ice explodes across the salamander's body, and it shatters into icy fragments. The icy explosion subsides, and he is still crouched, having unleashed his last technique, extreme blood freezing. He stands up, wipes a drop of sweat from his forehead, and looks at the smoking, frozen remains of a high-rank monster. A wave of relief washes over him. He did it. He shifts his gaze to the only survivor from the previous group, a young woman who looks at him with wide-open eyes and silently. She approaches, says she's going to take the proof of the monster's subjugation, and only then asks if she is okay. He apologized for scaring her, explained that he is currently taking an exam and needs proof of subjugation, asked for permission to take the monster's magic stone, and the stunned woman could only make a barely audible sound. When he turned away, she was suddenly struck by a realization. She froze, staring at his back, unable to shake the thought that he might be the very legendary one known only as the Magic Emperor. Returning to the guild after the registration exam in Durunku and the subjugation quest for the fire lizard, Klaus is suddenly met by a shocked Karen. She calls him by name, not believing he returned so quickly. A large crystal object inside which the body of a black salamander is preserved. He says he defeated the black salamander itself, not the fire lizard, and worries that this discrepancy might prevent him from passing. Ursel, the guild master, examines Credence and firmly says that this is by no means a failure. On the contrary, he announces that Klaus has passed and can now become a member of the S-rank guild, and Klaus, looking at the adventurer rank chart, points to himself in complete astonishment and cannot believe how he can be S-rank, the tier just below the highest. He says that across the country there are only a few SS-rank adventurers, so for most, S-rank is effectively the pinnacle, and then he persistently questions Klaus on how he managed to defeat an S-rank monster all by himself. She interjects, her face serious. She emphasizes that defeating an S-level black salamander alone and returning so quickly is undoubtedly an astonishing feat. He agrees, although the exam was for a lower rank, what he did effectively places him in S-rank. He admits that this is an unusual situation, but the result is what matters. His face darkened as he reread the conditions. They specifically asked for the black salamander, so the information was deliberately misleading. He feared that other adventurers might have died, and the whole request was a trap. Stepping away from the counter, Klaus walks alone down a long, quiet corridor and bitterly thinks. Here they thanked him, but in the magic corps he was considered talentless, and no one even wanted to listen to what he had to say. Next to the guild master stood Ursel and Karen, thoughtfully looking at him. Ursel noticed that this guild operates differently, and Klaus, flipping through the registration book, asked which profession to write down, aloud wondering if magic swordsman would be an inappropriate choice. In response, Ursel said that the vague title, Magic Swordsman, confuses people when forming a Partino one, understands whether his skills mean support with red magic or offensive black magic. Turning the pages and continuing to explain, Ursel said that because of this Klaus would have to register different. Young adventurer listened, his face becoming serious in anticipation of the decision. He raised his eyes and smiled broadly, suggesting simply to invent a new profession for him. Klaus flinched, stunned by such an unexpected proposal. His surprise did not fade when Ursel explained that there are no strict rules for professions. He recalled that when he was an active adventurer, even the class Magic Swordsman did not yet exist. He gave an example. Aaron, the current leader of the Holy Knights, was initially listed simply as a knight, but his holy power was so strong that it became his main feature and defined his reputation and role. Following this logic, Ursel noticed that the power of the blue mantle is healing, and asked in surprise why a holy knight would have such an ability. Klaus's eyes widened slightly at this hint. Suddenly it dawned on him. The mighty healing magic he once possessed really went beyond his previous role. Ursel seized the chance and suggested a new title, Swordsman of Blue Magic. Karen agreed that it suited him perfectly, and with new determination Klaus accepted it and asked to be registered under this profession. He looks at his new guild card, and a wave of recognition washes over him. When he was told to gather equipment, he realizes this profession, which was previously a sign of his supposed inability, is now something purely his own. Stepping outside, he runs into Karen's bright, smiling face. She runs up, hands clenched with excitement, and sincerely congratulates her brother on officially joining the guild. Later at home, he explains that although he hoped to join the S-Class Magic Swordsman unit, his new title allows him to take on special orders. Karen dispels all doubts, insisting that this is perfectly natural for his true abilities, and adds that Blue Magic Swordsman sounds cool. She beams, telling him that this profession was made just for him. Her unwavering support moves him, and he quietly thanks her. To celebrate, they sit at the table, generously covered with dishes, thank together, and only then start eating. He, smiling, praises the dish, says that Karen always finds time to cook for him even when he's up to his ears in studies, and once again sincerely thanks her for the care. His gratitude sparks a flame, and he announces that tomorrow he will cook for her himself. Karen looks up, surprised, and asks if he is serious. Her surprise instantly turns into genuine delight. She eagerly requests a pork steak and suggests buying a strawberry tart to properly celebrate his entry into the guild. The next morning in the Guildhall hall, Klaus cheerfully greets the receptionist with good morning. She notices his cheerfulness, and he, laughing, admits that it's not only because of the tasty food he has. She smiles and explains that since he officially joined, many requests have accumulated. She encourages him, saying that with him on the team, the guild's reputation will definitely grow quickly. He looks at her with determination, a slight blush on his cheeks, and says he wants to do everything in his power, especially now that his skills have finally been recognized. His sincerity confuses her. She exclaims that he shouldn't say such embarrassing things with that expression, and admits that it makes her want to hug him. She instantly pulls herself together, apologizes for the outburst of emotion, and winking, gives him the task for the day, a request only for S-rank adventurers, which greatly surprises him. The task describes the target adamantite, a magical creature with an extremely hard shell, powerful defense, and colossal physical strength. It lives on Crane Mountain, west of the capital. The power of Crane Mountain adamantite lies fallen. Klaus stands nearby and admires how much his sense of magic has improved. He realizes that now he can feel the approximate magical power of the entire country and decides to return. Returning to leave, he suddenly feels the ground tremble wildly. Frightened, he wonders if it's an earthquake, and at that moment feels an unfamiliar, powerful magic appear out of nowhere. He found himself before a source of immense power, a colossal crawler with a shell like a mountain of stone. It loomed over him, and its presence was oppressive. When the creature bowed its head, a sudden chill filled the air. He noticed burning red eyes, and with a shudder realized that this was not an ordinary adamantine at all. The beast let out a deafening roar. It was wider. Panic gripped him. How could he possibly fight such a powerful creature? He felt completely hopeless. Then it spat a stream of icy air from its maw, instantly freezing the ground around him. He recoiled from the biting cold. He stood, looking at the devastation and marveling at the creature's might. He saw a magical being for the first time and clearly understood. If he did not stop it here, the nearest town would suffer. Before he could even devise a plan, the beast lunged and crashed into him with its massive body. The blow stunned him, but within it, he felt a strange surge like a divine awakening. Consciousness began to fade. He saw the creature preparing for another attack. He knew he had to act now before it was too late. Kneeling, he gathered his last strength and cast the spell Pin, striving to fully restore his endurance and force his magical circles to open. A powerful wave of energy surged through him, and his hands began to glow. He felt his consciousness start to unravel. The world threatened to darken, a chillingly familiar sensation, as if he was trapped again in the same loop. Just as his vision dimmed, the adamantine monster let out one last agonizing roar. Its massive body crashed to the ground with a thunderous sound, and the monster's consciousness faded. He was gasping, wiping sweat from his forehead, when a wave of relief washed over him. He asked aloud if this was already the sixth time he had experienced this moment, the sixth loop. His gaze fell on the remains of the creature. It had miraculously shrunk to a fragment of its former size. Seeing that it was still breathing, he decided it might be an unknown, dangerous species, so he placed it in his bag with his belongings for safety. When he held the bag open, the small creature suddenly was sucked inside with a loud smack, and he watched in amazement as it completely disappeared into the magical depths of the bag. Hiding the strange beast, he returned to the Falcon Wing Guild. He knew he had to show this dangerous creature to Ursula it resembled adamantite, but he had no idea where would be best to do so. He approached the counter and called Jerry. When she turned around, he asked if Ursula was here. Jerry apologized for the delay and immediately offered to go call the guild master. Soon Ursula appeared. At first he thought Klaus had failed the mission to capture a living creature. When Klaus began to explain, Ursula interrupted him, and not hiding his distrust, exclaimed if he was serious about bringing back adamantite. Behind Jerry, he thought this newcomer was a new kind of annoying problem. With a knowing smile, he explained that the capacity of the item bag is determined by the magical power of its owner, and added that adamantite simply won't fit. Klaus reacted in shock to H. Patting Klaus on the back, he cheerfully remarked that it was impressive Klaus had enough magical power to be in the mage department, and the confused Klaus immediately asked where to release the creature. In response, Ursula suggested heading to the plains, just beyond the castle walls. In a moment, Klaus dropped to his knees with the bag open. Ursula called him by name, and a low, muffled rumble came from the bag. The creature poked out of the bag. Ursel couldn't believe his eyes and declared that this must be a new species of adamantii. Klaus, sweating profusely, asked to wait and was unsure if it was even possible. Ursel's face hardened. He asked again if Klaus was addressing him, Ursel, and then decisively stated that the creature was undoubtedly a monster. And suddenly he revealed the creature's true face. Behind him it grew to colossal size. It was not just a monster, but the sacred beast Jinbu, the guardian appointed by Oraberos to protect the world from evil. Somewhere else, heavy stone doors of an ancient ruin creak and slowly open, has the long-held seal finally been broken. At the Empire headquarters, Motto Aaron, the head of the Holy Order of Knights, anxiously reports to Commander Fowl. Healing magic is losing its power. Recovery time is significantly extended, and worst of all, some people can no longer be healed at all. Fowl, with a hint of irritation, cut in that the healing room is not his concern, and he has no connection to it. He sits at the table and grumbles angrily under his breath about being overwhelmed with work and why the red mages are lazy, and his thoughts are interrupted by a subordinate who bursts through the door shouting that this is an emergency. The man urgently reports, a horde of monsters is gathering right under the walls of the royal capital. Howell's disdain vanished, replaced by shock with wide-open eyes as he realized the terrible news. Meanwhile, somewhere far away, Klaus was intently watching a colossal creature lying on the horizon and finally allowed himself to acknowledge what he saw. It was the sacred beast Jinbu. The gigantic beast opened its jaws and spoke in an ancient, powerful voice, confirming that it was Jinbu, one of the holy beasts guarding the world of existence from the legends of Ouroboros. The flash of Ouroboros awakened a memory in Klaus. He turned to two children nearby. The girl said that her mother read her a picture book about the demon emperor. The boy added that it was very cool, and Klaus realized he knows this story. The tale from the illustrated book comes alive in his mind. 1,000 years ago, humanity lived in constant fear of monsters. To save the world, the celestial demon emperor set out on a journey to defeat the sinister dragon Ouroboros. After a long campaign, he finally reached his enemy. This memory intertwines with the image of a mother reading the same story to her children. Their small silhouettes are cast in the shadow of the great dragon. The end of that story reappears in memory. The demonic emperor, unable to destroy the great dragon Ouroboros, instead decided to seal it. For this, he placed 4 magnificent seals on the sides of the world and entrusted 4 sacred beasts to guard them forever. The burden of the legend settled in his mind. The deer-like creature before him spoke. Its voice sounded with ancient power and confirmed that this was truly Jinbu. Klaus froze, his eyes widened in disbelief before the living. The surprise shattered when Ursula's panicked voice demanded to know why the creature was not dead yet. Klaus calmly replied that he was actively stopping the creature's magic flow. For this, he placed his hands on the beast and cast a spell of forced magic, opening a complex weave of power shining between his palms. For them, the creature transformed into a huge turtle, and Ursula explained that when they found Jinbu, he was in a terrible state with strange red eyes, and the precious stone on his forehead was pitch black. He told how they collected high-quality magical stones that helped him recover like this. He noticed that Jinbu's eyes were originally black, so this change has its reason. When Ursula was speaking, Klaus felt like a blow to his chest and understood. For the guild master to be so worried, he must have come across something extremely serious. He was filled with deep understanding. This was Jinbu, the sacred beast, who healed his shell. As if in response to his thoughts, the giant turtle turned its long, serpentine neck, and its wise eyes met his silent gratitude that flashed between them. He looked unbelieving and blurted out that the creature spoke. Turning to Ursel, with wide-open eyes he asked if sacred beasts can talk. Even before Ursel could answer, a voice sounded directly in Klaus's head. The sacred beast Jinbu confirmed that he was heard and asked to name the listener. He realized that the voice was audible, and yet it flowed directly into his thoughts. Gathering himself, he introduced himself as Klaus Finley, and nearby the worried Ursel asked if everything was all right, to which Klaus quickly replied that there were no problems. The sacred beast apologized and explained that he must return home because his sister is waiting, and declared that if Klaus became his master, he would obey and follow him. Suddenly his massive body shone and began to shrink, curling into a tiny turtle that fits in the palm, to Klaus's complete astonishment. Ursel watched the conversation, not believing his eyes. Klaus was really talking to a sacred creature. He decided that this must be reported and that they should return to the guild. He even assured Klaus that the sacred animal seemed to be fine and that he entrusted it to him. With a strange expression, Klaus accepted this responsibility. Soon, in a quiet room, the little turtle stirred on the pillow and opened its eyes. The sacred animal looked at Klaus, who was sitting at the neighboring table in simpler clothes, spoke to him, asked if everything was all right, and anxiously noted that he had not eaten anything. He pressed the tiny creature and listened carefully as the sacred beast Jinbu confessed that he was worried about his master's stomach, a strange anxiety he had never felt before. and for the first time Jinbu's heart was so deeply moved by his master. He looks down at the creature, a drop of sweat shining on his temple, and it quietly says that its voice reaches him precisely because he is its master. He asked if that was the only reason, and the sacred beast explained that it had long waited for someone who could hear its voice, the only condition to become its owner. The beast declared that Klaus was that person. A moment of understanding flashed between them, and Klaus smiled, asking if that meant he could now call him master all the time. The creature explained that it had only one master, and that could not be changed, then revealed a painful memory. Several hundred years ago, it was separated from its previous master. He froze for a moment and suddenly realized they called him master only because he had healed it. The sacred beast warmly recalls its former master as a wonderful person, and Klaus, confused by its affection and tenderness, cannot comprehend how their bond works. He changes the subject and asks the sacred beast why it caused that rampage from the very beginning. The creature explains that the Oraberos seal was broken, and the power that escaped drove it mad. It worries about Klaus, then reveals the most important thing. Its sister, another of the four sacred beasts, is deeply sleeping in ancient ruins, and it warns that it is only a matter of time before she also awakens. A vision of a dark, vine-covered entrance to those ruins emerges in his mind. He froze in shock when Jinbu explained the location. The four sacred beasts stood to the east, west, south, and north around the ancient ruins, and Jinbu was one of them, sharing its consciousness with the others. This collective mind was their insurance. If the evil dragon resurrected, monsters would flood the world and conquer it. Jinbu noticed that it was exactly like in that picture book. The revelation fell on him like a heavy burden. He wanted to help Kylin, but suddenly a wave of doubts overwhelmed him. He became a traveler only to live a quiet, peaceful life with her, so what was he to do now? His inner conflict exploded into action. He punched, frightening the little turtle creature, and shouted that he was unfit to be its master because he had a sister he had to take care of. Just as he managed to explain something, Kylin flew into the room with a crazily frightened face and shouted an urgent warning. The Knights Academy is in danger. A huge horde of monsters is rushing towards the outer walls of the royal capital. Her news stunned him for a moment, and Jinbu, sitting on a cushion, nudged him to go. Kylin added that Ursel stands at the very center of the defense. Klaus interrupted the conversation, apologized to Jinbu, but insisted on going together, and the little beast gladly agreed, jumping onto his shoulder. With determination in their hearts, they rushed to the place where the disaster was unfolding. In front of the huge stone gates, despair reigned. Through a breach surged a horde of monsters, goblins, winged beasts, and even worse creatures, and facing them stood a line of defenders led by Ursel and Lorenzo. Arriving at the scene, they could only freeze in horror. The entire area behind the castle walls teemed with monsters. "This is terrible," whispered Kylin, while Klaus just watched as roaring, grotesque creatures broke through the defense. He stood in shock when Lorenzo shouted his name, but saw him with relief, and with the little creature Oraberos on his shoulder, Klaus looked at this chaos and realized that this must be the consequence of Oraberos' matchstick. In the command tent, Irene, the leader of the Holy Knights, turned to Ursel and asked who the newcomers were. Ursel introduced them as Klaus Finley from the Black Falcon Guild and Kylin Finley, a knight in training. Fowl immediately lunged at him, declaring that he was useless in this situation, and Klaus, stunned, asked why he was even brought to the strategic meeting. Nearby, Lorenzo's face twisted with irritation. He was annoyed by the disrespect towards a guildmate. He intervened and challengingly reminded that Klaus is an S-rank adventurer, not just someone who only knows how to heal. He turned to Klaus, said he was joining the fight for his sake, and asked him to first explain the situation. Taking over the leadership of the meeting, Aaron briefly outlined the plan. The capital's forces are divided into two fronts. The first holds back the main horde of monsters, but another horde was discovered at the rear. He said Klaus was with the second squad, and Lorenzo understood. If they defeat the rear horde, fighting the first will become much easier. To this, Klaus gladly volunteered himself, asking to be entrusted along with Aaron's troops to deal with the bosses, while Kylin looked on in shock, and Fowl and Lorenzo simply froze, completely stunned by his confidence. In response to his bold statement, Aaron, commander of the Holy Knights, took command. He declared that he and his knights would take care of the capital, while others were to guard the city from monsters. Then he addressed the invisible Klaus and gave consent, saying that since Klaus defeated the Black Salamander, he could act at his own discretion. He agreed to the terms without hesitation. His face hardened with determination as he grabbed the front part of the armor, and on his shoulder, Oraberos watched. His decision was immediately challenged by Kylin. She stepped forward and insisted that she would go with him to support him. Klaus initially refused and told her to return to the city with Ursel, but on her face was a mask of unwavering determination. He relented and allowed her to come, but only on one condition: she would be only a medic. Kylin gladly agreed to his terms. When everything was settled, they set off to where the sacred beast Jinbu awaited. Klaus called the giant creature, asking it to let them pass, and the huge turtle-like animal seemed to agree. As they prepared to depart, Klaus glanced at the large column of wounded and refugees. Their heavy steps echoed loudly around. Riding on the massive shell of Jinbu together with Karen, and nearby on a horse Iren, Klaus suddenly ordered to stop. He placed his hands on the shell, and beneath them on the ground, a glowing magical seal began to form. From the sigil burst a huge wave of power, a spell called Perfect Healing, which spread in a wide circle and gently covered dozens of wounded with life-giving energy. His magic thundered over the crowd, leaving a trail of sparkling light and a frozen silence. The spectators could hardly believe it. One man whose wounds had already disappeared could not believe if he was truly healed. Another looked admiringly at the grandeur of the magic and wondered how so many people could be healed at once. And Karen also froze, recognizing the familiar glow and whispering softly how incredible it was. The healing ended. He and Karen climbed onto the back of the sacred beast Jinbu. The giant moved, its steps shaking the ground, and Klaus announced to the crowd that this was their transport, and one of the men watching them pass through the gates suddenly recognized this was the blue hero. Riding the creature, Karen looked at him and quietly whispered his name. As they moved to the front line, behind them sounded a grateful crowd chanting his full name in a chorus of hope. Klaus, Klaus Finley, we are counting on you. In the midst of the chaotic battlefield, where adventurers fought boar-like monsters, the huge gates creaked open. From the darkness burst Klaus, riding the colossal sacred beast Jinbu. He surveys the place with a serious expression. The first platoon is almost destroyed, but he sincerely believes that Ursel and the rest will be fine. His gaze narrows, he focuses, and clearly understands what is most important to him. Somewhere else in the forest, the battle raged. The second platoon is drowning in a crowd of monsters, and the commander roared, "Retreat." At a distance, Klaus closely watches the knight's strategy. He cautiously bypasses the possessed and attacks only the demonic beasts. A large, shadowy creature with piercing eyes orders other monsters to heat their blood. In the very heat of battle, Ursel unleashes devastating power, shouting the name of his move, Hell's Blood Scythe. Flames burst around him and engulfed the monsters, and nearby another knight froze in amazement. He warns people not to lower their guard, explaining that the monsters are fire-resistant and still alive. Klaus, standing afar, is shocked to see how Ursel somehow burns the creatures from the inside, and cannot believe that such a powerful person exists in their country. He froze from this revelation, and suddenly a young woman with a determined look stands before him. With a single lightning-fast movement, she draws her sword, ready to protect him from the roaring, bear-like monster rushing at them. The thought about his sister Karen flashed in his mind. He imagined her easily dealing with a swarm of small cat-like creatures, and he was filled with a calming feeling. He could entrust everything to her, and everything would be fine with her. That thought evaporates as soon as danger makes itself known again. Klaus stretches out his hands and sends a wide magic detection spell. The earth responds with a deep tremor, and he feels that deeper in the forest the monsters are forming ranks and moving, as if protecting something. Their target revealed itself with a roar that shakes the earth. From the trees burst a colossus with a bull's head. Iren recognized in it the horde boss, the Minotaur king, and shouted in amazement that it was an SSS-rank monster, too powerful for the Holy Knights alone, calling for someone to lead the vanguard. In response to the knights' plea, Klaus turned his gaze to his mighty ally, placed his hand on the sacred beast Jinbu, and asked him to defeat the boss. The great beast responded and accepted the task. The holy monster can move, but the Minotaur king rushes forward with incredible speed and swings a massive axe down at Iren. He barely manages to parry the blow with his sword, and shockwaves scatter through the air from the collision. The monster lunged into attack, its body ignited with frenzied heat as it activated the skill Extreme Heat Blood. The force of the collision threw Klaus to the ground, but the invulnerable Iren was already raising his blade, preparing to unleash Holy Cross. As the knight prepares its sacred assault, Klaus suddenly realizes this won't work, and with a determined look, he swiftly rises to his feet and rushes forward, flying past the astonished places. The sudden movement draws the attention of the sacred creature Jinbu. The colossal beast looks at the small group Klaus, Iren, and the swordswoman, who bravely stand before the giant Minotaur king. This scene awakens a memory from long ago. His memory returns to an ancient confrontation, when the younger Klaus faced another powerful, stubborn beast, and the holy beast Jinbu contemplates what it means to be a master and understands. Simply loving Klaus is not enough. He believed that one who cannot protect their people is unworthy of being a master, and perhaps he never said this outright. He recalls how the young man with a determined gaze always put the safety of others above all else, and fought regardless of the risks to himself. At that moment from the past, Klaus struck him directly in the head like a silent declaration of intent, which Jinbu perceived with his mind. So this is Lord Klaus. And then a destructive force burst forth, a technique unleashed by the whisper of its name, Extreme Ice Blood. The icy energy struck not the enemy, but Jinbu's own horn, instantly shattering it. and at that very moment the sacred beast understood, this was the one who was my master. As the memory of the old enemy's fall fades, the scene returns to the present. The Minotaur king stands defeated, encased in ice. Klaus steps away from the fallen giant, leaving the holy knights stunned and silent. Their shock turned into cries of disbelief. One of the knights shouted that Klaus had defeated the boss and now only weaker monsters remained, and Klaus, hearing this, turned embarrassed, raising his hands in defense. He sweats, trying to downplay his incredible deed, insisting that he only succeeded thanks to their support, and that he could never have managed alone. He gives all the credit to them, calling them the true heroes, and the knights look on with pure admiration. He stood amid the stunned silence of the holy knights, who instantly erupted in praise. They shouted that he was incredible and had never seen anything like it, and Klaus just listened, a little stunned by their subnarration. Their leader Irene approached him, his voice trembling with admiration and gratitude. He confirmed that Klaus had indeed defeated the SSS-rank Minotaur king, and thanks to this their losses were minimal. Uplifted in spirit, Irene announced that now they would handle the remaining threats and asked Klaus to explain everything in detail later, and Klaus, overwhelmed with emotions, could only stand quietly. He quickly tried to divert attention, raised his hand, and declared that there were still monsters around. He announced that he was going to use magical detection to survey the area, a convenient excuse to avoid further questions. Looking around, he suddenly opened his eyes wide, was gripped by anxiety. His senses led him to a stunning scene. He shouted the name Kylin, pointing to a clearing where Jinbu stood. The sacred animal called its master, and Aaron and others turned to see the swordswoman with braids standing over two fallen adventurers. Approaching closer, they saw a young man desperately trying to wake his unconscious companion wake up. He begged, and in the background Klaus and Jinbu were rushing to the spot, and Klaus was calling her name in despair, Karen. He knelt beside the fallen girl Karen. The swordswoman with braided hair explained that Karen had protected her from a monster attack, and possibly because of that was poisoned, and while she spoke, soft light began to emanate from Klaus's hand. The glow intensified and exploded in a dazzling flash of healing energy, completely enveloping Karen. The swordswoman with braids watched, stunned, as Klaus calmly announced a full recovery. Under the wave of healing magic, Karen's eyes began to open. His gaze fell on another adventurer, the swordswoman with braids, who grimaced in pain. She grabbed her leg, and with a heavy feeling in her chest, realized that the healing magic was not working. He watched, his face frozen in a terrible realization. His powerful healing had also failed. This was not a simple wound, but a curse. Elsewhere, another adventurer, Karen, whom he had saved, clasped her hands with relief and sincerely thanked Klaus, explaining that thanks to him her father could now rest peacefully. The sight of the curse struck Klaus directly in his memory. A painful recollection resurfaced about his time in the mage department, when he recognized the same ailment in a patient and was powerless to find a cure. He recalled with horror the grim diagnosis. In the final stages, the curse turned the victim's body to stone and doomed them to inevitable death, and now he understood in fear that this was the same curse affecting Karen's companion. Again in the treatment ward of the magical department, Klaus was watching over the unconscious swordswoman. Tamara, the head of the department, entered with a thick book in her hands. She told him that she had been investigating this since another adventurer with the same symptoms died. She opened the book and saw on the page a serpent-like creature resembling a dragon. Ouroboros, she said, asking if it was related to the curse. Tamara explained that fragments from sealed ancient ruins break free and attack people nearby. Her research left no doubt. Everyone bitten by a shard of the Ouroboros soon began to have black, curse-like patterns crawling over their body. Klaus turned to his companion, the holy beast Jinbu, and asked if he knew anything, to which the little turtle shyly apologized, explaining that although they were sealed instruments, they could not recognize the Ouroboros seal, then added a few words of thanks and assured Klaus that she was fine. Suddenly he realized with horror that the revival of Stampede by the swordswoman was only a harbinger, a sign that fragments of Ouroboros were involved in it. He had been deceived, and after that. Kamara spoke her thought aloud, her face gloomy. She explained that, like the other adventurer, the woman with the sword would probably start to slowly turn to stone. Her words strike Klaus with horror. Tamara says that woman has about 2 years left, and this term makes Klaus's thoughts race. Immediately remembers his sister Karen. He looks for even a drop of hope in Tamara, but she plainly says there is no known cure. However, when her hand touches the book, it gives a tiny ray of hope. She says that in the neighboring country of Saint Folia, records from 200 years ago have been preserved. They describe in detail how the saint from that land was able to break the curse of Ouroboros. While the swordswoman rests, Jinbu adds, the saints of Holy Folia have guarded the seal of Ouroboros for generations, so perhaps the current saint knows how to lift Karen's pinching curse. Klaus became even more determined and announced that he was going to Saint Folia. As soon as he turned to leave, Tamara shouted to him, "Wait." She explains that the saint from St. Folia is not someone you can just meet like that. Without hesitation, Klaus cheerfully asks her to contact her acquaintances, promising to wait a few days. He sincerely and joyfully thanks her for the help. He declares that in the meantime he will check if he can do something with his blue magic. Tamara sharply interrupts him and warns him not to act recklessly. His determination hardens. When the sword woman with braided hair solemnly swears to him, Klaus has only one goal in his mind: he must break the curse of the Oraberos. Before Klaus stands a huge salamander-like creature, all in flames, and next to it, a young woman with long dark hair looks stunned. She realizes that this is the person she was looking for, the one who possesses a special golden magic, and she cannot believe that he appeared right before her. Her mind wildly raced from the guild's news about the defeat of the Minotaur king during the invasion. She came to investigate and swore to find the culprit, the one she considers the demon emperor, and her thoughts swirled when Klaus, with a half-hidden face, asked if everything was all right, noting that someone like her could save the world. Leaving that meeting behind, Klaus walks through the healing corridors of the Mages Guild. His face is gloomy and determined. He knows he must find a way to lift the curse from Kylin. Lonely footsteps echo quietly as he walks down the silent corridor. Suddenly a voice calls his name. It is Aaron, the leader of the Holy Knights. He approaches Klaus with a worried look, asks if Kylin is safe, and says that Tamara informed him about what happened. Looking into the adjacent room, his face softened with pity. The woman with the braided sword lay motionless in bed. Near her head rested a small turtle-like creature, and Aaron sadly noted that she was still sleeping. Turning back to Klaus, he advised him not to overexert himself for Kylin's sake. Noticing Klaus's exhausted appearance, Aaron hands him a wrapped package of food, says that he probably hasn't eaten, and offers to share. Klaus quietly accepts and whispers thank you. Sitting together at a small table, Aaron said he had a conversation with Klaus that was not about Kylin's condition, and looking him straight in the eyes, asked why he was dismissed from the Mages Guild. He stands before Aaron and explains that in the hardest times he did not notice the truth. Aaron presses him, wondering why such a wonderful person was rejected. He admits the bitter truth. He was considered useless because he only knew healing magic, and for that he was paid half as much as others. Aaron is stunned. He cannot believe that Commander Fowl treats a person with such talent, who saved so many lives, this way. Suddenly their tense conversation is interrupted by a barely audible groan from the neighboring bed. Both men turn in surprise, and Klaus exclaims, Kylin-sem. On the bed, the eyes of the woman with the braided sword slowly open. She looks around confused and quietly wonders where she is. She suddenly sits up, shuddering, seeing the two men. What is this? She exclaims. Klaus calmly explains that she is in the healing room of the Mage Guild and asks how she feels. Then her attention is drawn to something on her arm. She looks down, eyes wide with anxiety, and Klaus's voice reaches her. His grim words sound like a curse. Her gaze freezes on the dark, intricate symbol freshly carved on her forearm. Klaus explains that she probably received it while protecting someone during the battle, then delivers the harsh truth. The curse is slowly paralyzing her limbs, and he is powerless to remove it. Aaron asks if there are any other treatments, and Klaus says that Tamara gave him materials about a healing done by St. Folia, but he knows little about it and cannot inspire much hope. His face twisted in despair, he thinks all his hard work was only to protect Kylin. He stands by her bed, weighed down by the thought that he was useless at the most important moment. From the bed, Kylin quietly responds to his unspeakable despair. Her voice prompts him to apologize. He called himself a miserable brother, and his self-deprecation caught her off guard. Her eyes widened slightly. Her surprise melted into a bright, reassuring smile. She sat up energetically and confidently said that she was fine and could move without any problems, to the surprise of both Klaus and Aaron. He froze, unable to comprehend what he saw, and could only whisper her name, Kylin. While he tries to understand, Aaron steps forward and firmly reminds that Kylin saved many of his soldiers. The leader of the Holy Knights promises full cooperation and asks everyone to speak calmly. Klaus, still stunned, sincerely thanks them. Kylin interrupts. With a gentle expression on her face, she addresses her brother directly, assures him that she is fine, and says that it is time for him to go home. To emphasize her point, she firmly takes his hands. Her soothing smile does not fade while she looks at her. She is determined. She will seek help from the saint and devote herself to an even deeper study of treatment methods. Tears ran down her face as she looked at Klaus. He met her gaze with unwavering determination, folded his hands in front of him, and solemnly swore he would be the one to cure her. Through tears, she confirmed the promise and insisted that he must do it. A quiet, thoughtful sound of agreement escaped your lips. He sat by her bed and took her hand in his. The dark, intricate patterns of the curse were a bitter reminder of the ailment they fought together. Several days passed, and Klaus knelt before Kylin, explaining that since then he had been conducting experiments trying to find a way to cure her. He unfolded his theory, Where the magic of her curses and his power intertwine, he could try to influence with his magic right there, and Karen confirmed she felt a slight tingling, but nothing noticeable happened. He continued, but she suddenly screamed, her face contorted in pain. Apologizing, she explained that this time the sensation was painful and caused numbness, a clear sign that the attempt was failing, and she regretted that despite his daily efforts, they saw no positive result. The failure left Klaus helpless. He did not know what to do next, and was tormented by the fact that he had not yet received any news from Amara. It was then that the silence was broken by a doorbell. He approached the door and opened it, apologizing for being late. Before him stood a woman with long dark hair, and he, surprised, asked who she was. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed by a wave of emotions as the mysterious woman threw herself into his arms. Joyfully shouting his name, she seemed delighted to have finally met him. He was completely confused by the sudden touch, stammered, and asked what was happening. Realizing she had been too insistent, she instantly pulled back, apologized, and asked him to please let her go. The noise pulls people out of the house. Karen appears and asks her brother what happened, and another young man with disheveled hair demands to know who this stranger is. Now surrounded by two people in uniform, the woman bows deeply. She gives a formal apology to Klaus for her incredibly rude behavior, expressing her sincere. Straightening up, she introduces herself in an authoritative tone. I am Seraphina Dale, the second saint of Cynifolia. Klaus's eyes widened in shock. He remembered how Tamara spoke about the saint, and could not understand why the saint himself came all the way here to see him. Before he could speak, Karen steps forward and asks Seraphina if she knows about Oraberos. Seraphina replies that she does, that is exactly why she is here, and politely asks if they would listen to her story. Agreeing to hear her out, the group sits at the table. One of Seraphina's assistants hands Klaus a formal letter, requesting him to review it first. He looked at the document, and suddenly a vision appeared before his eyes. A woman in a pure white dress and veil, hands folded before her. She called herself Maria Folia, the great saint of Cynifolia. The vision of the great saint spoke to him directly. Her voice sounded resolute. She begged him, as the wielder of golden magic, to unite with the holy beast, seal the Oraberos, and protect the world she called the current lord of demons. Her words struck so hard that the swordswoman with braids exploded. Shock and rage instantly mixed on her face, and she demanded to know why Klaus, the one who sealed the legendary lord of demons, was now being asked to become the next. Seraphina calmly began to explain the situation, pointing to a world map. The world is engulfed in chaos, and the four nations of Cynifolia are at its very epicenter. She continued, delving into the history of their duty, and explained that Cynifolia's role is to pacify the Oraberos. Once the country of Arland sealed it, but after several hundred years, that seal finally cracked. The seal is now broken. The sacred beast has disappeared. She explained their desperate situation. Every time the Oraberos broke free into the world, they had to find a person with the same golden magic as the first sealer to seal it again. Klaus digested this great revelation and asked if that was the saint's purpose, to guard the seal of the Oraberos. The swordswoman with the braided braid instantly caught on. Was that why they had come so far? Seraphina confirmed that he understood everything and explained. Her people use crystals that measure the power of the demon lord all over the world, and it is with them that they are currently searching for him. She extends to Klaus a glowing pendant and asks him to pour some of his magic into it. He is stunned, recalling the magic abilities test 5 years ago. Unlike others whose glow was red or black, only a golden wave shone in him, and Seraphina confirmed that this was exactly what they were looking for, explaining that the pendant given to him 2 weeks ago was what finally pointed to him. The realization overwhelmed him with stunning force. He mentally asks himself, does this mean that he inherited the power of the Lord of Demons? Seraphina instantly refutes his assumption and firmly insists he is not the demon lord. Instead, she begs him, like Klaus, to help them reseal Oraberos. His thoughts turn to another urgent matter. He emphasizes that the curse afflicting him and his comrade must be lifted, and he knows they are aware of this. Seraphina agrees, but insists on the urgency of their main mission, warning that if they delay, monsters will flood the world. She continues to explain that the only way to lift the curse is to defeat the Oraberos, and the problem is that from the very beginning this creature was only sealed, never truly defeated. Klaus pondered, recalling that even the Saint Tamara could not break this curse, and while he was thinking, Seraphina intervened, saying that there is actually another way to lift it. She explains, this method is to obtain the scales of the holy dragon Kylin, a creature that is the direct opposite of Oraberos. She continued explaining, confessing that finding Kylin was extremely difficult and that she did not know how, and Klaus and the young swordswoman listened in shock as she added that Kylin's existence was shrouded in mystery. Unlike the holy beasts, it is said he exists only to directly seal the Oraberos. Her story suddenly became personal. She confessed that her own father was afflicted by that curse and had once been treated by Klaus, and then her mother went to find Kylin to save him, but never returned. Klaus's eyes widened in shock, and the memory of the incurable patient finally formed into one picture. It was her father, but her gloomy expression melted away. In its place appeared a radiant, resolute smile. She said that now everything was different. She had become a saint, and Klaus the Lord of Demons, and with their combined power she was confident they would find a cure. The swordswoman, though hesitant, quietly agreed. Serafina proposed that they all discuss Kylin's matter with the great saint together, pleading for her to agree. She did not back down. She suggested immediately arranging a meeting with the great saint and returning to Centifolia together. She also asked permission to speak with Kylin and others from the guild, to which the swordswoman gladly consented. Lao, stunned by the sudden pressure of plans, exclaimed aloud in surprise, "Where to even begin?" Serafina simply smiled and reassured him, "Don't worry, you are our benefactor." He watched her walk down the corridor, and suddenly everything became clear in his mind. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope, and the path forward finally became visible. He turned to the swordswoman, his face covered with determination. He placed his hand on her shoulder and said he was setting off to Centifolia to ask the great saint for help. He informs his sister of his decision. She, with gentle determination in her eyes, clenches her fists and quietly agrees. Meanwhile, in Woodville Castle, Faltino from the Guild of Mages stands before the King Kiefer, warmly thanks him for his efforts and for the considerable stock of endurance elixirs he recently delivered. Modestly brushing off the praise, his facial expression became sly, and he shifted to another topic, asking King Kiefer if he had heard the news about the traveler who single-handedly defeated the Minotaur King. King's gaze sharpens. He pressures Fowl, demanding to name the adventurer. Fowl, clearly frightened, stammers and assures that he knows no one of that kind. Leaning back on the throne, he spoke authoritatively and told Fowl that he had a very important task for him, which he expected him to undertake. Fowl accepted the order without hesitation. The monarch finally uttered the name. He was seeking Klaus Finley. He ordered Fowl to personally recruit the young man into the Guild of Mages. His eyes widen in disbelief. A wave of shock washes over his face as he tries to comprehend the king's order. At that moment, Klaus stands in the shop, gathering supplies for the journey, and suddenly stops. Bitter irony strikes. He was expelled, and now they call him back. In the healing room under the starry sky, Tamara reads the letter with surprise on her face and murmurs to herself, not believing that she is learning about the third saint, and that it is all connected to a promise made to the great Saint Centifolia. Examining the letter, Klaus enters. He admits that he was also surprised by the summons, and Tamara turns to him, holding the envelope with the wax seal, confirming that this is the very letter she was told about. His expression becomes serious as he processes what he has read. One phrase echoes in his mind the belief that he could help as the person he is today. "Thank you for the information," says Tamara, looking at him with a knowing gaze. His desire to help is so great that his heart seems almost transparent, and his intentions pure and visible to all. Seeing his sincere determination, Tamara decided to give him a farewell gift for the road. She said she wanted to tell him a story. Devin recoiled to a painful memory. She recalled how a magical creature simply outmatched her and left her so broken that she could not fight, and locked in the healing room, she felt as if she had abandoned her duty as a mage, powerless amid chaos. Henry sharpens a blade. A bandaged man calls for help. A much younger Klaus steps forward and tells the seated man that he can handle it himself. The boy suddenly lunges and snatches an unstable, glowing magical artifact from someone's hand, and Tamara, in shock and fear, calls out his name. Hold on. The dangerous light fades. Young Klaus returns with a bright smile and says the danger has passed. Tamara reproaches him for recklessness, and as the memory fades, a clear conclusion arises in her present thoughts. At that moment, she decided that protecting Klaus's good heart was more important than her own pride. House, slightly blushing in the cheeks, thought admiringly about Tamara's skills. He decided that she was truly incredible in healing magic. Under the starry sky, his reflections hardened into an unshakable vow. He promised to master the healing skills Tamara taught him, to heal Kylin, and to never allow vile monsters to harm anyone again. The next day, when their tiny little dragon settled on Klaus's shoulder, he told Kylin that the guild would be closed for a day. They were preparing to set out, and Ursel approached to ask if Kylin would join. He addressed Klaus directly and revealed a shocking truth. His family, the Albertis, was a clan of guardians sworn to protect the sacred beast Jinbu, and the stunned Klaus only whispered, "Do you mean the Lord of Demons?" Ursel explained that his task was only to watch over the sacred beast, and honestly admitted that if the Lord of Demons appeared, he might not be able to hold him back. Then he asked Klaus if he knew where the Lord of Demons was, and Klaus quietly confirmed that he did. The creature on Klaus's shoulder interrupted the conversation and said that the holy monster Jinbu awakens simultaneously with the Lord of Demons. Ursel confirmed this and explained that the Guardian clan lives near the sacred land where the beast slumbers. And he revealed his true purpose. Although his duty was to protect the seal, the sudden appearance of the Lord of Demons could compel him to swear allegiance to the Holy Besaid, citing a divine mission to cleanse the world, and he formally asked Klaus for permission to join their journey as Jinbu's guardian. The revelation struck Klaus with great force, suddenly realized that Ursel's clan had been preparing for this for generations, and that he himself, unknowingly, had been searching for the Kylin horn with the help of such devoted people. Ursel looked at him intently and added that his duty as a guardian was an unbreakable commitment from which he would not retreat. He considers Ursel's proposal, acknowledging that he himself cannot continue this path. With a serious face, he officially agrees and says he understands everything and looks forward to their cooperation. Having made the decision, he walks through the city alongside his sister Karen. A gloomy silence hangs between them as they walk. They meet Jerry and Klaus entrusts his sister to his care. Jerry responds with a radiant, confident smile, assuring him that he can leave everything to her. Then Klaus turns to Karen and says that it is time for him to go. She looks up at him, calls him brother, and shyly asks if she can really join him later when she recovers. Jerry gently intervenes and asks Karen to rest now, then adds with a tender smile that she would be pleased if Karen stayed nearby for a while. He silently agrees to Jerry's suggestion, knowing that it is the best option. The path ahead is too dangerous for her to go alone in her current state. The sister's expression became firm with determination. She looks him straight in the eyes and promises that as soon as she recovers, they will set off on an adventure together. Her words suddenly illuminated him. Joy blossomed on his face. He enthusiastically agreed and began painting a vivid picture of their future. Journeys to unknown lands, festivals, street food, and victories over monsters. When she asked if he was serious, he smiled broadly and replied that of course they were adventurers together. When he was about to depart, the swordswoman with braided hair who had joined his squad shone with a radiant smile, as if sprinkled with stars. She cheerfully confirmed her decision and said that if he was going on an adventure, she would gladly go with him. When he and Ursel set off on the road, Klaus waved goodbye and promised that he would definitely return. Their journey began under the endless sky, as if dusted with clouds. They rode atop a large lizard. Ursel, smiling relaxedly, said that traveling on Jinbu was strangely comfortable, and Klaus, seizing the moment, asked his companion to tell more about himself. Ursel began the story. He had already been to Sinifolia and lived there until he was 15, then honestly admitted he never thought he would ever embark on such a journey. He continued, his gaze lost in the distance. It became clear that since childhood, he had often been told about his life mission. Hearing this, Klaus's face became serious. He confessed that he passionately desired to become stronger and explained that it was not only because of the wish to help his sister Karen, he needed strength to break the seal of Oraberos, especially since the saints helped him, though they barely knew him. Ursel weighed the words, then noted that strength was an unknown thing. A memory of their departure surfaced, and seeing the swordswoman in armor, Ursel invited her to sit in the saddle of their horse and go with them. On the road, Ursel asks if their path leads to the capital of Sinifolia. Klaus confirms, but says the road is blocked due to recent panic among animals. Monsters have appeared. At that moment, a huge two-headed wolf-like beast lunged at them, and the swordswoman with braided hair cried out in horror. The swordswoman with braided hair instantly reacts and jumps forward with her blade, while the creature defends itself, growing sharp black spikes from its skin, a technique known as extreme ice blood, while Klaus and Ursel watch in shock. The monster lay on the street defeated and motionless, so the path was still clear. Klaus turns to Ursula with anxiety and asks if they can stop by Tamara's house on the outskirts of the city, insisting that she must immediately teach him something vital. He smiles, gestures forward, and tells Klaus to go ahead. Meanwhile, in a quiet office of a large building, Klaus's sister, Karen, sits at a desk, resting her chin on her hand, deep in thought and quietly, anxiously whispering her brother's name. Her thoughts were suddenly interrupted. The door burst open sharply, and Commander Fowles ran into the room. His face was twisted with rage. He shouted, demanding to know if Klaus Finley was here. He slammed his fist on the reception counter, demanded Karen's name and why she was here, dismissively called her a cheeky receptionist, and ordered to immediately bring Cloud Stammer. She stood up, her expression hardened with defiance, grabbed Fowles's hand with amazing strength, told him she had nothing to say to a man without manners and common sense, and ordered him to believe that she acted without hesitation. Her hand squeezed Commander Fowles, and a cold surge of power instantly covered his fist with sharp ice. Her hand glowed with an icy aura, and a wide, anxious smile appeared on her face. Fowles screamed and recoiled from the piercing cold. Enraged, he demanded to know what she was doing to his dear receptionist. But Karen simply asked what business he had with her. Watching the exchange, Jerry looked on, and a drop of sweat ran down her forehead. She had not heard the spell and realized both of them were incredibly strong. The cold did not stop him. He bluntly said he was looking for Klaus Finley, who must be involved in this offense. Before he could continue, Karen struck the counter with her free hand with a loud bang and declared that Klaus was most likely in the capital of Maltino and swore she would catch this inept fool herself. Her oppressive silence was disgusting. With a sly smile, Karen turned to the nervous Jerry and asked if he had told his brother about her, adding that she needed to have a serious talk with Klaus. Her aura was becoming so threatening that Jerry noticeably became frightened. She returns to the reception, her expression softening a little. Jerry says that the rest of the adventurers probably won't return, but asks her to stay on duty a little longer. As soon as Jerry agrees, Karen approaches the window and looks outside, thinking that her brother is probably already in the country, and suddenly a memory emerges. She was 5 when she found out that she and Klaus are not related by blood. Her thoughts returned to a childhood conversation. She remembered explaining to little Klaus that we are not related, so we can always be together even without a blood bond. If we love each other, we can stay together forever, and it was this naive thought that made her question the idea of marriage. This memory suddenly surfaced in the present. She again felt that childlike joy at the thought that she could become his fiancée, but now she understands he values her as a younger sister. Still, a new hope smoldered in her heart. If her wish comes true and they both become adventurers, maybe everything could change. This hope fueled a quiet, stubborn desire she carried in her heart for him to finally look at her, and only at her. While she held this secret desire inside, Klaus looked into the distance with an inscrutable expression, and deep in his heart feelings remained unspoken. Riding on Jinbu, Klaus and Ursel approach a secluded wooden house hidden deep in the forest, where the sun plays through the canopy, and when they dismount, Klaus looks at the simple dwelling. Understanding flashes in his eyes. This is why they came so far. Walking to the cabin, Ursel asks if Klaus knows whose house it is. Klaus confirms seriously that he knows it must belong to Fowl, the former commander of the magic department, and Ursel is noticeably surprised. She corrects the boy's assumption. They are here to see Morse Cambridge, a man famous as a genius of magic manipulation, and his name seems to hang in the air, wrapped in an aura of incredible power and intellect. House is stunned by the revelation. His thoughts race, trying to comprehend the new information. Ursel continues and adds that Morris is a member of the respected Albert family. The meeting took place. He pushes open the creaky wooden door and gestures for Klaus to enter the workshop. What greets them is an organized chaos. A man with long light hair sits with his back to them, fully immersed in work among piles of books, papers, and strange mechanical parts. His beloved hands hovered over the complex device, a panel with a large central dial and numerous buttons. He muttered to himself as if making the final fine adjustment. For a moment, Ursel, the man, turned to Klaus and with an irritated sigh said that the launch of the new superdimensional communication device caused a crazy influx of requests, and at this pace they would never cope, gesturing at the mess and asking Klaus to find a place to sit. In the workshop, Klaus solemnly introduced himself to the seated figure of Morse Cambridge. The reclusive genius only slightly turned his head, acknowledged the introduction, and with that gesture confirmed Klaus's identity. Before the conversation could ignite, another voice sharply interrupted it. An elderly man with a piercing gaze said that Tamara told him about their request to meet the saint, and that he was also asked to personally evaluate Klaus. Wasting no time, he smiled broadly and threw Klaus a challenge right here and now. The sudden proposal left Klaus completely stunned. They went out to the clearing near the workshop, and the old man explained why he arranged this challenge. He believed that a person's true character and strength are revealed only face to face. As soon as he finished explaining, the ground beneath the old man broke away. He rose into the air, wrapped in a pillar of light. He called Klaus to begin, and Klaus, looking up and not believing his eyes, felt that this power was incredible, much stronger than anything he had ever encountered in adventures. The display of this power caused an instant fierce reaction in Ursel. He shouted that this was not at all what was agreed upon, and reminded the old man that Klaus was supposed to be tested, not him. The old man calmly laughed, did not argue, and acknowledged this Ursel, guildmaster of Woodville and leader of the Black-Winged Falcon, would fight in his place. Then he ordered Klaus to prepare, and the young man agreed. Klaus focuses. A complex magical sign ignites in his hand. He activates Regine, Limit Break, and Divine Secret Awakening, and a formidable sword with a dark blade emerges in his palm. Opposite him stands Ursel, ready, weapon drawn, and with a grim face. He raises his hand, gesturing for Ursel to wait, but the guild master announces he will strike first to feel the flow of the battle. With amazing speed, Ursel closes the distance, his dark blade already in motion. A powerful swing tore Klaus's cloak. He immediately understood that he could not allow Ursel to touch him. Feeling his strength being drained, he recognizes this as a black magic draining spell, clenches his teeth from oppression, casts the spell High Heel, and realizes that this is the power of the demonic sword Ursula Shiva. He jumps back, increasing the distance. He knows that if Ursula touches him directly, he won't be able to cast spells. Ursula watches with a confident smile, asks if he's done already, and reminds that Klaus hasn't even counterattacked yet. The guild master taunts further, asking if Klaus will just let him get behind his back. Klaus admits fighting a thinking opponent is hard, but he has no other choice. He accepts the challenge, and at that moment Ursula quickly does a backflip. In response, a complex magical symbol materializes before him. He did it. Completed spell surged forward and hit Ursula right in the back. The guild master exclaimed in surprise, and the old man watched with lively interest. The world fades for Klaus. He loses consciousness. A force surge of magic dissipated from Ursula's back. He gets up, confused, demands to know what Klaus did, insisting he managed to avoid the attack, but Klaus lies unconscious on the ground and cannot answer. He regained consciousness after the duel, and showing Ursula and Morris Cambridge a glowing magic circle, talked about the nature of his unique magic. Klaus explained that the circle must be drawn in advance because he needs time to activate it, but it consumes very little magical energy, so the technique proved successful, and Ursula acknowledged this, while the depressed Morris, who lost the bet, asked what he should do now. Klaus reassured him, and admitted that he actually doesn't know how to use any other magic besides this. The conversation was interrupted by the appearance of a respectable old man who approached them from the neighboring building. He smiled warmly and raised a small intricate device for them to see. He explained that this item is a magical device, a communication machine that expands its range by pouring a fixed portion of magic into all its circles. The old man said that if Klaus learns to direct his magic into it, he will definitely become stronger. When he handed over the device, Ursula intervened and told Klaus to wait. Then he addressed Morris and ordered him to mind his own business. Klaus agreed, but Ursula's interference left him puzzled. He still didn't take his eyes off Morris, asked with obvious irritation, "Why did you agree to such an incredible amount of work?" While Klaus stood embarrassed and watched as the old man showed a large box filled with dozens of the same communicators. The old man clarified the situation. The recent monster invasion caused a crush, due to which these magical instruments became extremely necessary for many people. He continued, saying that without these communication devices, people would be in trouble. A diagram appeared showing how monsters block the paths between settlements, cutting off any connection. The explanation ended. The old man's gaze softened. He looked directly at Klaus and told the boy that he saw traces of his efforts, the path his magic had paved. He noted that these efforts were not for himself but for someone else, and that was why he must continue training. Klaus raised his eyes, and surprise and realization flashed in them. He readily agrees to the task. Nearby, Ursula sighs heavily, looking tired. Ursula immediately objected and offered help, but the old master pressed him with his hand and sternly said that the way Ursula channels magic is too rough and would result in something completely different. Vosha, but he only smiles to himself after all. He wanted to work precisely in that magical center where Morris was. The old master addressed him again and explained that although his control and speed are good, the most important thing is to make the flow of magic even, and asked if Klaus understood exactly how he had just used his own magic. He says that his eyes are so sharp that he can see the very flow of magic. Raising one of the communicators, he asks Klaus to try to direct his power into it to check. When Klaus channels magic into the device, it sparks with energy, and the old man calmly explains. A certain amount of magic must be directed in a thin, long stream to increase the communication range. One properly enchanted device works for 10 kilometers, and the test, he says, is to successfully enchant 10 such devices so that the total range is 100 kilometers, and only then will you pass. After setting the parameters, he officially asks Klaus to finish a large number of devices, and Klaus, holding the communicator, eagerly accepts the challenge and promises to do his best. The initial enthusiasm fades, giving way to a colder, serious assessment. He realizes that with his current abilities, he can only enchant 5 devices, and the whole process reminds him of an exhale, a long, steady breath of magic. He gathers his courage and resolutely declares that he will see the matter through to the end. Nearby, the old master advises Ursula not to waste magic, but Ursula seems to be pondering the 7 devices he has already managed to craft. His determination was fueled by the memory of Karen. She held one of the devices and said that with its help they would be able to contact important people, and then promised to fully support him as her master, a promise he gladly accepted. Relying on that memory, he focuses his energy magic flares around the device in his hands, and the device shines brightly, while Ursula watches from a short distance. In the workshop, Ursula successfully lifted the enchanted device, a triumphant smile shining on his face. Klaus stood on the other side of the table, cluttered with components, and looked with wide-open eyes in amazement. He proudly informs the master that he has finished. Almost immediately, Klaus jumps up and says that he has also completed his task. The old man examined their work with a smile. They lit not 10, but all 15 devices a great help. Announcing that both had succeeded, he proposed the next task to try to channel magic through a magical sword. In response, Ursel summons a formidable weapon. A large dark blade with a serrated edge appears in his hand, sparkling with a powerful aura, and he loudly shouts its name, the magical sword Shiva. An incredible force bursts from the blade. Klaus freezes stunned and gradually realizes Ursel's depth of magic is a completely different level, and he confidently feels that under the current conditions he cannot defeat him. He had not yet recovered from the recent surge of power when the old craftsman ordered him to create a magical formation with both hands. Klaus, confused, asked for clarification of the order, but the master simply pushed him forward, and nearby a healing light barely appeared. Following the instruction, he stretched out his hands and held his breath as two glowing magical circles appeared before him. Trembling, he realized that now he could simultaneously deploy two formations, something he had not been able to do before. Ursel watches, a slight irritation passing over his face. He mutters that he wants a rematch. Ignoring him, an excited Klaus asks the master if he can continue training in Cynifolia, even if Morris will not be there. The old master smiles warmly and agrees, then adds, "Of course, it is better for Klaus to come." His face lit up with a broad, relieved smile as he and Ursel exchanged a look of complete mutual understanding. When the training ended, a grateful voice echoed over the landscape, thanking the master for his mentorship. Meanwhile, in the royal castle of Centifolia, Seraphina Dale desperately pleads. To heal her sister, she needs help finding Kylin, and she insists that if Klaus restores the sacred beast, it will not allow Oraberos to resurrect. She addresses her words to a young girl who listens with a worried expression, and the girl asks if Seraphina, until recently, a mere mortal, can really save the world. Riding a large saurian steed through the dense forest, Klaus warmly thanks Ursel for acting as a mediator before the great saint and obtaining a communication device from Oris. On the way, Ursel casually says that his family is already allied with the house of the Duke of Cynfolia and that this helped their negotiations go smoothly. Klaus Steyer, surprised, asks why Ursel never mentioned his. Admiration turns to embarrassment when Klaus asks why Ursel, the guildmaster, is so closely connected to the Duke's family, and Ursel calmly says that the great saint is a wise man and it is better to be fully prepared. Taking this to heart, Klaus adopts his determination and declares, in exchange for the return of the four sacred beasts, he will ask for help to find care for them. Hearing this resolute statement, Ursel became serious. Understanding froze on his face at how difficult Klaus's decision was. Finally, they reach the capital Martino. Klaus gazes enchanted at the beautiful, sunlit architecture and feels the mystical atmosphere of the city, while Ursel confirms that this is the very country ruled by the same lord. He walks the lively streets, feels the welcoming, friendly atmosphere, and thinks that Karen will definitely like this city. He vows to bring her here one day. Castle shifted his gaze to the majestic building. In the distance, it was the castle of Cynfolia, and he told Klaus that the time had come for their meeting with the great saint. In the castle corridor, their path is crossed by a frightened woman running, and Seraphina Dale appears slightly behind, grabbing Selina by the hand, but suddenly freezes, eyes widening. "Klaus-sama." She exclaims in shock, and Klaus is equally stunned, asking why she is here and why she is speaking to him about the great saint. They were led with Ursel to the great hall, where a woman named Seraphina, apologizing for the delay, addressed the majestic Saint Mariana, who silently stood on a distant dais, then turned to Klaus and confessed that she was seeing the demon lord for the first time. She looked stunned by her quiet dignity and inwardly called her the great Saint Mariana. He bowed his head low. She thanked him for the opportunity to speak and gently asked him to raise his head. She continued, explaining that the demon lord is a rare creature that appears only once every few hundred years, and to his surprise added that it is they who swear allegiance to this ruler, asking him not to be nervous and to speak openly. He stumbled, thanking you, still not able to grasp her words. Seraphina then nudged him to move on to the main topic of the visit. Her gaze jumped to the creature on her shoulder. She recognized Ouroboros as the demon lord and said that his seal could be broken by the four sacred beasts. He was stunned by this revelation. The thought that the demon lord bowed before a great saint seemed impossible, but he realized that this might be his only way forward and wondered if Selina had told her about it. A new voice was heard nearby. It was the small, turtle-like creature Jinbu. He declared that the four sacred beasts are awakening, so the removal of the seal is only a matter of time, and expressed their wish that the demon lord return to the sacred beasts in his true form. The scene shifts to a solemn hall where Klaus stands before Seraphina. He calmly agrees to her terms, but adds that he has only one request. The meeting took place due to a desperate plea. A young maid had earlier informed Selina that her younger sister suffers from the Ouroboros curse. Time is pressing. Overwhelmed by urgency, he now specifically addresses Seraphina. Before restoring the other sacred beasts, he needs to find Kylin. He is ready to give all known information. What he looks like, where he lives, and the date and time of the last sighting. He slightly bows his head, apologizing to the demon emperor for the trouble this will cause. Just as he is about to continue, Serafina interrupts him, her voice unwavering. She states that he cannot search for Kylin until the sacred beasts are revived. Klaus's eyes widen in shock. Her words stunned him. He stammers and barely utters that he has little time left, that his sister's life is at stake. She coldly and definitively explains her position. She cannot help him search for Kylin, and these words leave Klaus speechless. She explains that he must first fulfill his duty to that other beast. This condition weighs on him so heavily that his head spins, and he asks for a minute to think. The conversation took place near a large building, with a tall spire under a partly cloudy sky. Nearby, a maid with a braid anxiously addresses Serafina, insisting that Klaus bears a heavy responsibility and sincerely values his sister Selena. She barely turns her head, her face unwavering, and says that her duty is to protect the lives of hundreds of millions of people. He smiles with quiet understanding, feeling and acknowledging that he is different from her. He recalls that not long ago he was an ordinary young man and remembers a kind healer who once helped him and stopped that stamp that he. She listens, but doubt flashes in her eyes. Why do people give their country to a saint? Because the blood of a holy woman alone is not enough. She says because she was raised with awareness and a firm intention to protect the homeland. From birth, she was taught specially so that she herself could fulfill this duty. The road to restore the sacred beast senses will be strewn with numerous trials. He walks away, pondering the enormous burden, and when suddenly told to save the world without preparation and without resolve, it is hard not to give up halfway. He turns around, but Serafina's voice stops him. She retracts what she said earlier and suddenly, with burning confidence, says that if it is for his sake, she will definitely save the world. The scene returns to the past, and we see Serafina speaking with the veiled great saint Maria Folia. She confesses that there was something about Kylin that she could never tell her. She continues, revealing the grim truth she had long concealed. To obtain the Chilean's key, the saint must become a human sacrifice, and suddenly a vision flashed in her mind. A young girl stood before a radiant, ethereal silhouette of a beast. The secret emerges into the light. Kylin is merely a sealed form of the Oraberos. When the saint sacrifices herself, Kylin drops the key, the very one that can lift the Oraberos' curse. Serafina shockingly confesses to the great saint. The current Kylin is her elder sister and simultaneously her mother, and a woman who strangely resembles her appears in her memory, standing before that creature. The majestic saint reacts with disbelief, doubting the 200-year-old legend that the saint must become a sacrifice to obtain the key. She asks if this terrible story is true, leaving Serafina stunned and speechless. Returning to the present, Serafina reveals to Klaus another painful aspect of the tragedy. Her father, in grief, tried to lift the curse himself to save his wife, but in that act became a Kylin, and she says with pain that she did not manage to stop him. Her sorrow hardens into determination. She tightly clenches her hands, swears again, and her gaze is unwaveringly directed forward. She will do it for Klaus. She stood before the great saint and said she understood Klaus's feelings, but posed a critical question. What if Klaus gets the Chilean's key and simply abandons his journey? Suddenly a vision flashed in her mind, her younger self surrounded by grotesque hands grabbing. Without Klaus, she and the entire country would be lost, and the world overrun by demons. The great saint, addressing her as Selena, asked if she still intended to believe in Klaus despite these fears. Her gaze was unwavering, her resolve obvious. Meanwhile, in the bustling town of Ursel, someone tried to cheer Klaus up and suggested going for a walk, but Klaus, with a worried expression, turned to the guildmaster and asked what he should do. He could not hold back. He exploded in despair and shouted that he could never return all the sacred beasts to their true forms. Ursel calmly pointed out that helping Kylin meant they would not be able to restore the sacred beasts, and added that the great saint could not be trusted. Klaus clenched his fist. Torn, his dream was to make Kylin happy, but she was the one suffering. He looked at the market and thought further. Yes, the one who has that unique power is his dear sister, but can such a person truly be called the protector of the people? To prove his point, Ursel directly addressed the young hero. He looked him in the eyes and asked a sharp, simple question: does Klaus really have the will to protect the world? He is silent, immersed in a memory of Kylin. She smiles and asks if he can still fight, even if she were gone, and reminds him, if he shirks his duty, a terrible fate awaits the world, and this is the realization he carries within himself. Thoughts race, sweat runs down his forehead. He feels his duty and determination, but suddenly realizes that he has not at all considered the message he was supposed to convey to Serafina about the will of the spirit. Ursel's voice cut through his storm of feelings and calmly said, "It should be so." He explains that he is not angry at Klaus for lack of determination, Now he is simply talking with him to understand what he is thinking and to assess the situation. He says he believes Klaus will save the world, but immediately asks him directly, does he have the necessary determination for this? The guild master's gazes turned icy, and he tells Klaus that it cannot be true that Karen is the only one who matters to him, reminding him of the clear evidence of his heroism and the countless people he has already saved. While he was speaking, images of those clowns seemed to run through the young man's thoughts. Ursel insists that if Klaus does not find determination within himself, he will achieve nothing, and for the sake of all these people, he must be able to do it. The words struck like a hammer. Klaus's eyes opened wide, tears that had not dried glistened in them as the weight of Ursel's truth descended upon him. He stood with his back to Ursel and listened attentively. The guild master gave him one last piece of advice from now on: he must think independently, and Ursel assured that as soon as he decides on the topic of conversation, he will arrange a meeting with the great saint on his behalf. Conversation ended, and Klaus found himself before Seraphina Dale, the second saint. She looked at him intently and ordered him to be attentive to his own weakness. Surprised but determined, he answered firmly, yes. That morning, when he decided what he would do, Klaus left the tavern together with Karen. Outside, Ursel stood with crossed arms and asked if the decision was made, and Klaus nodded firmly. Determination burned on his face. After his decision, he and Ursel accompanied Seraphina and the magnificent Saint Maria Folia through the city streets. When they approached the grand cathedral, Seraphina turned to them and thanked them once again for the time they had given her. In the sacred halls of the cathedral, the great saint addressed Seraphina directly and said she had received a response from Ursel, but there was a sense in her voice that it was not so simple, and Seraphina listened with a worried expression on her face. While the saints deliberated, Klaus gathered his will into a fist, his gaze fixed forward. Quietly but resolutely, he ordered to move on, ready to face what lay ahead. Determination met an unexpected turn. The great saint sincerely apologized. Her words made Seraphina's eyes widen in shock, and Ursel looked on with confusion and distrust. She could not comprehend that apology, and turned to the great saint with a question, and Seraphina recalled that she herself once said a harsh word, and wondered aloud why Maria Folia was apologizing. Was it because of Klaus? The reason for the apology became clear when Klaus fell to his knees in supplication before the great saint, and explained that great power carries great responsibility. He had inherited the might of the Lord of Demons. He said that if they failed to awaken the holy beast, the world itself would be on the brink of destruction, and he took this burden upon himself, stunning Seraphina. He continued his solemn vow, not averting his gaze, and in his mind flashed the image of Karen, bound in chains, as he promised to save the great saint at any cost, even if it meant that fate itself would bind him. Seraphina watched, her face a mixture of surprise and anxiety. He walked beside his sister, and his thoughts cleared, showing him the goal. He needed neither wealth nor fame. Only one thing mattered: not to become the one who would place the fate of the world on his sister's shoulders. For him, this was a simple, undeniable truth. Then he addressed the great saint directly. His voice confident and firm, he admitted that he should have said from the start about his decision to awaken the holy beast. The great saint listened, her face unreadable. He continued and said that his sister had always been first for him and that this would never change. Maria Folia quietly confirmed his words, but a shadow of uncertainty sounded in her voice. His thoughts returned again to the promise made under the starry sky. He told young Karen about his dream to become a traveler, join the Ursel Guild, travel the world, and eat in countless places, but even then he knew that these dreams would come true only if they were truly happy. Turning to the present, he revealed his feelings. Although at first Karen drove him, now he had many people who cared about him, and he sincerely wanted to protect them. His gaze met the great saint's, his facial expression shining with hope. He politely asked her for help, inquired if she would agree to cooperate with him so they could save the world together. He smiled, folding his arms on his chest with new confidence, promised to give all his strength to the cause, and added that he would be grateful for any information about Karen that she could provide. The sincere request and unwavering determination clearly moved the great saint, her eyes shining with emotion. She looked at him, and in his eyes she saw not just a plea, but a whole universe of determination sparkling with the weight of all the lives he wanted to protect. His mind was filled with the faces and voices of those he had sworn to save. He heard Selena's desperate plea to save their lives, the encouragement of the old craftsman to continue building communication devices to talk to loved ones, and the young man's promise to become stronger. And all these hopes pressed on him, the responsibility he felt he must bear to bring happiness to them all. Seeing the depth of his convictions, a tear rolled down Maria Foli's cheek. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice full of admiration. She acknowledged his intention. He truly wanted to save them all. Deciding, she gestured for them to go deeper into the chamber, addressing Klaus and stealing her soul. As they went further, she began to explain her thoughts lively. She admitted that having only what he told her, it would be too risky to demand that he be taken hostage, so she had to make a difficult choice. He paused for a moment and admitted, taking people as a bargaining chip is the act of an immature demon lord, and now he realized it. She quietly laughed with a gentle smile, and while Selena watched, assured him that he was truly a wonderful demon lord. When a new alliance is born, Ursel confidently winks and hands Klaus a communicator, saying he heard from Morris about their efforts to help establish the production of these devices for people. Meanwhile, Maria Folia contemplates the consequences of their agreement, and a determined smile appears on her face. She understands that this alliance will make them all stronger at once. She reaches out her hand to Klaus, her face glowing with determination. She persistently calls him to join and insists that together they will save the world. He takes her hand without hesitation and seals their pact. Nearby, Ursel and Selena watch the two, and their faces show genuine approval of the newly formed alliance. Their path leads to a towering structure, a place connected with the very black magic they seek to understand. Maria Folia leads the group to majestic, finely carved doors, saying this is the way forward, then turns and addresses one of them personally. She places her hand on the surface of the doors, and looking at the stunned Klaus, explains that only the power of the Lord of Demons can open them. The request is clear. She needs his magic. He stands before the huge doors, which open with a dull, hollow groan, revealing the way forward. Maria Folia waits a little behind him, a silent observer. His eyes widen as he surveys the grand throne hall bathed in ethereal light. At the far end stands an ornate throne, empty but formidable. Maria Folia's voice sounds behind him, explaining that this is the room where the Lords of Demons abdicated power in turn. He is struck by a flash of recognition. He feels as if he has been here before. His gaze falls on the glowing magical circle on the floor, the pattern exactly the same as his own, and he wonders aloud why he is here. Seeing the circle, a storm of scattered images bursts in his mind. A smiling woman, monsters, joyful children, and fleeting glimpses of his own past, all swirling in a chaotic storm of thoughts. He steps back, clutching his head as a mental attack literally overwhelms him. Deep down, he insists he knows nothing of it, but a conflicting sense of familiarity floods his consciousness, and with growing horror, he realizes these memories are not his. Struggling with foreign thoughts, Klaus hears Maria Folia calmly ask if the memories of the first Lord of Demons have returned to him, and this question struck him like thunder, making him freeze in disbelief at the very thought that he could be his reincarnation. She understands how confused he must be, and says that such an amount of information surely sows chaos in his head. Noticing his anxiety, she gently suggests he rest in the room for a while to process everything. Still stunned by the revelation, Klaus can only quietly and uncertainly agree. He stood in the magnificent hall, and suddenly with a quiet knock and a puff of smoke, a colossal figure of the sacred beast Jinbu shrank right before him. When he sat down, the now tiny creature approached and quietly asked if he was all right. Klaus, still overwhelmed by the flood of memories, admitted that it was too much information to process all at once. He began connecting the dots into one picture and aloud realized, probably that is why his magic is so different from others. It needs a magic circle. Still puzzled, he turned to Jinbu and asked what exactly it means. Jinbu began to explain the essence of their world. People and beasts are born with mana inside one, only needs to learn how to draw this innate power. But his method was completely different. He raised a shining magic circle and realized that it was absorbing the very surrounding mana of the world, transforming it into his own power, what is called mana transformation. It was this very variability, the ability to control the magic circle and transform the mana of the entire world, that made him the Lord of Demons. This unique method was the secret of his incredible strength. Jinbu noticed that by drawing from an external source, he could use powerful healing magic without expending his own reserves, and suddenly, a vision flashed in his mind. His past self, who understood that it was precisely his immense, though different, magical power that was the cause of his situation. The last piece finally fell into place. He looked at the creature. A gentle smile blossomed on his face, and he apologized for forgetting. Finally, I remembered, he said. I remember you, Jinbu. The creature Jinbu looked at him with soft eyes, and as if apologizing for making him forget, addressed Klaus simply, Master. Overwhelmed with emotions, Klaus rushed forward and hugged his old friend tightly, sincerely thanking Jinbu for waiting for him all this time. Then Jinbu asked his master to touch the gem embedded in his forehead. He explained that by touching the jewel, his master's memories would return even clearer. Klaus listened, and his face became serious as he realized the weight of this moment. As soon as his fingers touched it, a powerful memory surged within him, a memory of the first demon lord, Cecil. He saw a vision of a man and a woman walking away, leaving two small crying children. In the memory, the woman explained to the young Cecil that the parents were setting off precisely because he and his brothers and sisters were very important to them, and warned, if nothing changes, they will not survive. The truth settled in his thoughts. The parents left to protect the people they loved. Following their example, he, as the first demon lord, tried to protect the whole world from. The goal reignited a fire within him and strengthened his resolve. Klaus returned to the present, his hand clenched into a firm fist, and from afar Ursula's voice sounded confidently. He was sure that Klaus could do what was needed. His mind cleared. He returns to his companion. "Thank you, Jinbu," he says, his voice filled with new determination. "Let's return to the other sacred beasts." The creature responded with complete devotion, its voice ringing with impatience. "Of course, my lord." Next to the tall clock tower, Seraphina excitedly announces that she will join the journey. Her companion anxiously warns that it is dangerous, but Seraphina waves it off, and with a bright smile says she is confident in her abilities. Her statement was met with resistance. Ursula insists that she must follow his orders, and Klaus, noticeably irritated, sharply tells her not to refuse. Seraphina showed a round, exquisite magical device and explained that it was a teleport, assuring them that if anything happened, it could be used to return to the castle, and then with sincere gratitude in her voice, thanked them for entrusting her with such a precious item. The question was resolved. Ursula named the goal. Karina was last seen in the kingdom of Hudent, where near Akko her sacred animal was sealed by her guardians, the Moslin family. While he spoke, an image of a fierce black cat with two tails appeared in the air, and Klaus eagerly said they would head there. When they were about to leave, Seraphina's maid quietly pulled her aside, with worry on her face, and whispered whether this was really okay, especially regarding Kira. Seraphina's expression changed. With a sly, almost cunning smile, she ordered her maid never to speak of this to Klaus. She admitted that she simply wanted to repay a debt she owed. When she, Klaus, and Ursula stood ready to depart, before them appeared the great Saint Maria Folia in a solemn white dress and veil. She extended a farewell blessing, and wished that the divine protection of Kylin would guard them all. On the outskirts of the country Hudent, an official announced before the crowd that Saint Centifolia had declared war on the demon lord, but his voice grew somber. Their own sacred beast, the white tiger, had already awakened and sensed their presence. He continued speaking passionately, declaring that the white tiger was the sacred beast of their people and must be defeated to protect the homeland. In the crowd stood the braided swordswoman Kylin silently, clenching her fists, with a grim determination on her face. The official's eyes narrowed. He admitted to himself that he had requested a guard for the seal, but suspected that person already understood the full seriousness of the situation. Thoughts about Ursula. He stood alone, his bow and quiver visible behind him, the official's assessment grim. The guards of Hudent were powerless in this matter. Meanwhile, far away, Klaus and Seraphina crossed the forest on the back of the colossal Jinbu. Seraphina enchantedly admired the journey, and the smaller lizard companion, also named Jinbu, noted how surprisingly smooth the ride was. He turned to Seraphina with a bright smile and asked what kind of country Hudent was, confessing that he eagerly awaited meeting the white tiger. They continued. The little Jinbu explained that 90 of Hudent was forest, so the place breathed holiness and natural generosity. Klaus aloud wondered whether Kylin would like to go with him, causing the nearby maid to blush and exclaim that she would very much like to, and the little Jinbu noted that her words sounded remarkably sincere. Attention was caught by the sincere reaction of the servant, so Klaus turns to Ursula, who joined them, and directly asks, "Are you worried about Kylin?" He listens as Ursula says, "As soon as you settle in Hudent, contact the guild through their communicator." Klaus sincerely thanks him, and Ursula just waves indifferently. The conversation ends. The group continues on foot, their boots confidently stomping along the forest path. Going deeper, Klaus marvels at the vastness of the forest, watches the local animals, and notices that Hudent is a country that truly values coexistence with nature. Seraphina picks up on his thought and explains that to protect this natural balance, the country keeps skilled hunters at hand. Ursula adds that people cut down the forest as little as possible to receive the forest's blessing, and because of this, travelers have to act differently. Seraphina is delighted, and Klaus, deeply impressed, understands that the country is truly protected by the forest itself. The realization is interrupted. Anxiety explodes on the group's faces. Ursula shouts about an ice-white obstacle, and at that very moment, a volley of shining arrows materializes from the clear air, flying straight at them. Seraphina recoils in shock. Klaus wonders at the sudden hostility, and aloud asks if this means the hunters are their enemies, as he cannot perceive this attack as anything other than a misunderstanding. Ursula quickly corrects his assumption, urging, "Come on, faster, use your power." When Klaus turns around in surprise, Ursula clarifies which abilities he means: regeneration, limit break, and mystical awakening, and behind them the volley of arrows hangs in the air. He sprang into action, and his comrades only watched. Seraphina, frowning with worry, asked Ursula, "Since Klaus's abilities are limited to healing magic for the living, how will he cope with a hail of arrows?" Ursel remained confident and simply said that Klaus will find a way. Hovering in the air, he sharpened his senses and expanded his consciousness to catch the flow of mana around him. The search led him directly to the source, an extremely experienced hunter standing a whole kilometer away. Realizing that avoiding such a fierce volley was impossible, he prepared a countermeasure. A glowing symbol formed in his palm. He thrust his hands forward and cast an explosion spell. Two magical circles appeared in the path of the arrows and detonated them with a series of fiery bursts, preventing them from reaching their targets. Despite his efforts, the arrows closed in tighter around him, and their approach became a real threat. Below, Ursel explained to the stunned Seraphina that Klaus had ignited static electricity in the air to cause explosions, and Seraphina could only marvel that it worked thanks to healing magic. In response to the relentless offensive, a new force burst forth. Enormous roots exploded from the floor of the force field, twisting and growing incredibly fast under the influence of the spell of endless growth. Colossal roots grew into a living shield and intercepted the last arrows. One tendril gently wrapped around Klaus, lifting him up. He stood and looked, bewildered, while the sudden defense completely caught the distant archer by surprise. He found himself trapped in the very forest he sought to conquer. Enchanted roots entwined his limbs, and he looked up with distrust, wondering whom Ursel had brought as an ally, for he had never before seen such powerful and unusual magic. Ursel met the newly arrived Shuya with a knowing smile and remarked that they were indeed acquainted, reproaching him for always trying to win by some strange means, while Klaus with Oraberos on his shoulder looked on in surprise and realized that this attacker was the long-awaited guardian of the demon lord. Ursel interrogates the subdued archer, sharply asking if he was warned in advance that a guard would arrive in the western country without any explanations, while the boy, drenched in sweat, stands confused and does not know what to answer. In response, he threw himself to the ground and made a deep, loud bow, shouting a desperate apology. Klaus, standing nearby, shuddered with surprise at this sudden and excessive display of remorse. Ursel calmly asks him to calm down, assures that no one is blaming him, asks the archer to listen to their version and decide for himself, while Seraphina silently watches. Klaus looks thoughtfully with a quiet expression on his face. He says that despite everything, Shia is incredibly strong and he is glad that from now on they will fight side by side. Hearing these words, the archer raises his head, eyes full of emotion, and silently notices the sad expression on the other's face. The archer froze in stunned silence, and Klaus leaned over, firmly shook his hand, and smiled with a warm, friendly smile, once again repeating how glad he was that they would be allies. Overwhelmed, the archer formally knelt, introduced himself as the guardian Shia Moslin, and swore to give Klaus his body and soul. This statement confused Klaus, and Ursel, smiling, advised Shia to simply call him Klaus and speak normally, but Klaus intervened and declared that it was an order. He looks a little stunned by Shia's fiery agreement, but confirms that such an arrangement suits him. Shia, practically glowing with admiration, announces that for her it is a great honor to receive an order from the demon lord who watches over them, and Ursel notes how quickly the situation changed when. As they walked through the forest together, Ursel advised that the news of the demon lord's arrival had probably already spread throughout the country, so Klaus should avoid cities for now, and Shur agreed, surprised that someone else could have arrived so quickly, and admitted that he himself did not feel their approach. Their path was halted by the sight of a large roaring beast, distinguished by its silhouette on a nearby hill. Klaus anxiously asks if the white tiger is already rampaging. Shia confirms that the creature has lost its mind, and it is only a matter of time before it is locked in a magical barrier. Behind them, Seraphina, with a grim expression, urges them on, saying that the mad beast is not the real problem. When they climb the hill, a terrible truth opened before them. The white tiger is not raging, it is bound with thick ropes and pierced by numerous arrows. Above the tortured animal stands a figure in a cloak conducting a cruel taming ritual, and Klaus froze in horror, unable to believe his eyes. Seraphina tells of a terrible misfortune. This beast is the sacred guardian of these lands, and if it dies, the very earth will wither. She says the real problem is not the beast, but the lords who torture it and who must be stopped. Hearing this, Ursel's hand clenched into a tight fist. He mentally tells himself that his warnings were not heard a failure he fully attributes to his lack of strength. He turns to Klaus with a sorrowful look and says that a barrier has been raised in the forest, which they are unable to remove. He apologizes and says that if he had acted earlier, this could have been avoided, while Shia tries to comfort Klaus, asking him not to blame himself. Ursel returns to Shia Moslin's archer with a pleading expression on his face. He asks Shia to save their white tiger, desperately begging her first to bring the beast to its senses. Before Shia could respond, Klaus steps forward with a confident smile. Oraberos settled on his shoulder, and he assures them that this is exactly why they came. With a clear purpose, the group walks down the central street of Huey Des. While they walk, Ursel explains that interfering with the barrier will require a magical tool from the guild. their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a stern official who blocks their way. The official glared angrily downward, while Shia fiercely insisted that the barrier was not a simple magical thing. He firmly said that the Duchy of Ahan would handle it with the White Tiger and demanded that this matter be left to them. There, his calm begins to crack, does not understand what a person can do without comrades. A drop of sweat appears on his temple as he realizes he can call for reinforcements from his family. Suddenly, the official grabbed Shuya by the collar, called the archer an incompetent guard, and declared that since he was good for nothing, the demon lord himself had offered to subdue the beast instead of him. Faust froze, the official's words echoed in his head, felt they were talking about him and his healing magic. When they turned and walked away, he recognized the bitter, familiar parallel between the Shia situation and his own past. He rode on the back of the great beast, listening to how Oraberos spoke about how much time it takes to apply for a magical tool, but his thoughts were constantly about the archer, did not understand why someone as strong as Shuya behaved that way. Meanwhile, Shurya considered himself merely an incapable guard. He explained that he was simply chosen from his clan for this role when he was only 16. He remembered how the beautiful forest deeply moved him, and how his heart filled with pride at the thought that he was destined to become the guardian of this land, but his dreaminess was suddenly interrupted by a contemptuous voice. His attempts at something new were met only with contempt. Other adventurers discouraged him from magic, saying it was dangerous, but he only explained that his element was fire, so he sought to combine it with archery. The memory continued. He was surrounded by guild comrades. Even the guild master Ursel was nearby, but no one trusted him, and as a guard he felt completely alone. The memory faded, and he remained standing with his back to the very people he was supposed to protect and recognized, and without any acknowledgement. Klaus, who was watching from afar, softened his facial expression with understanding. Klaus approached the archer and told Shui that he understood. His fighting style was harmonious, like the forest itself, but others were wary because they did not feel that harmony, and Klaus finally realized why Shui lacked confidence. Looking up with a bright, reassuring smile, he told Shia that everything would be fine and promised him that he would definitely find friends. This unexpected kindness left the archer speechless, and tears sparkled in his eyes. He tells Shui that everything that happened in the past no longer matters, and Serafina enthusiastically adds, "Take advantage of this battle and show everyone how incredible you are." His words touched the young archer, and Shia, with a determined smile and tears in his eyes, agrees, understanding that this is the very moment when his true value as a guardian will be tested. Gaining courage, he hears the lizard companion Jinbu say that it seems they are late, and adds that the lords they met earlier are already in place. His warning sounds just at the moment when Shuya and Serafina notice the scene ahead. To their surprise and horror, in the distance on the back of the giant sacred beast, Jinbu stand Klaus and Ursel, watching how everything unfolds. Before them, a majestic white tiger trapped in a snare roars in pain and tears at the heavy chains driven into the ground. The nobles surround the beast and tighten its bonds. Horrified by what he sees, one sharp command quickly arises in Klaus's mind: save the white tiger. Before the crowd of hunters, a huge white tiger, the sacred guardian, roars in agony, shackled by heavy chains. Shia Moslin watches this with anxiety, realizing that the barrier is broken and they will have to help. In the crowd, Klaus decisively steps forward, places his hand on his heart, and boldly declares that he is the Lord of Demons, and from now on will take control of the situation. In the background, Commander Fowl laughs contemptuously, calling him a fool. He turns to Fowl and apologizes for the sudden interference. Fowl, impatient, simply tells the self-proclaimed Lord of Demons, "Hurry up, start." The announcement stunned those present. Shia stood with eyes wide open in disbelief, and Commander Fowl's face twisted into a mask of pure shock and outrage. The shock quickly turns into rage, disgusting malicious smiles, mocking questions: how do they now expect the white tiger to obey? And someone raises a whip-like rod, threatening to beat the beast themselves to force it to submit. She can strike, she shouts to him. Wait. He urgently explains that the hunters will have no chance to defend themselves in such an open place if things escalate. The confrontation intensifies. Serafina takes a step forward. The round artifact in her hand begins to glow softly, and she calmly intervenes, asking to wait. After all, she was the first to find this loot. The artifact flared up, and instantly a shimmering magical barrier appeared, enveloping the white tiger bound in chains. A sudden surge of power frightened the hunters, who noticed that the beast's growl from inside the cage was growing louder. She stands firm, her magic flared into a double barrier, a misty shield and sacred energy restraining the white tiger. Klaus turns to his little companion Jinbu, ordering him to act together with Serafina to protect the hunters, and Jinbu nods, accepting the order. The sudden appearance of the magical shield shocks the hunters. They suddenly find themselves saved. The Shia Molens looks puzzled, while Serafina urgently calls everyone to flee into the forest. He demands to know who she is. Ignoring his question, she shocks everyone with a statement. She is an ally of the Demon Lord, and with a stern expression she again insistently urges them to hurry and escape. Inside the barrier, the white tiger lets out a fierce roar, and its colossal strength struggles against the magical shackles. The monster rages. Shia turns to Klaus with a confident smile and reassuringly says that his help is very valuable and that everything is fine. In the distance, other hunters whisper, wondering what is happening here. He addresses his comrades and announces that since the Demon Lord has already arrived, they can breathe easy, orders to move into the forest, and decides to trust what is happening to lead his people to safety. As his people retreat, Shia draws a huge sword sparkling with energy and declares that he will face the formidable power of the beast himself, preparing to absorb its strike, while Klaus watches stunned. Suddenly, a tree nearby splintered. The girl was thrown up and fell to the ground, screaming desperately. The noise frightened the retreating hunters, and Shia's confidence shattered. He sharply turned around and anxiously called Klaus and the others. When the invisible strike fell, the man in the dark cloak reacted instantly and stretched out his hand. A complex magical sign flared, releasing a wave of protective energy as he pronounced the spell's name, Extreme Flame Blood. The explosion dissipated, leaving the fleeing woman unharmed but alarmed. The cloaked man asked if she was okay, and when she hesitantly answered affirmatively, he pushed her toward the forest, urging haste, and when she looked back, her eyes widened in shock. A flash of recognition crossed her face. She noticed his blue mantle. Then he turned his attention to the other hunters, felled by the attack. One groaned in pain, and his comrade tried to support him. The man in the cloak whispered another spell. Gentle healing light enveloped them, perfect healing that instantly closed the wounds. A sudden flash of powerful magic seemed to calm the great white tiger. The beast, which a moment ago was raging, froze. His gaze was fixed on the scene, and a dark crystal gleamed on his forehead. When the immediate threat to the hunters was removed, the man in the cloak and the archer Shia finally found themselves face to face in a small clearing. "At last we have met," said the man in the cloak in a calm tone. He no longer paid attention to the archer. Instead, shifting his gaze to the sacred guardian, the tiger let out a low warning growl and bared its fangs. Unafraid, the young man addressed the beast directly. "White tiger, I will help you now." Before Shia could grasp his intention, Cape Man summoned another power, infinite growth, and the ground around the archer exploded. Thick, knotted vines shot out from beneath it, twisting in the air and wrapping around him. The vines rapidly closed into a dense wooden cage, completely immobilizing the stunned archer. Having achieved his goal, the man in the cloak calmly stood on the back of the now obedient white tiger and looked down arrogantly at his captured enemies. He stood before the pacified tiger, and the captured archer with a satisfied smile on his face. Good, he thought, that everyone here was to witness this memorable moment. His moment of satisfaction was shattered by the furious shout of the man in the fur-collared coat. He growled for them not to interfere, and at that moment, an arrow whistled through the air toward the tiger. Shoya fired the projectile, though he was still entangled in magical vines. The archer managed to shoot, his face a grim determination, and Klaus, eyes wide with disbelief, watched this act. Arrow hit the target with a heavy, dull strike. A painful roar erupted from the white tiger as the arrow struck the crystal embedded in his forehead, and his consciousness began to fade. The official in the fur collar froze, stunned by the catastrophic failure. No one even had time to react before a colossal dark figure descended from above, struck the stunned tiger with incredible force, and threw him to the ground. While the spectators roared in shock, the beast was felled with a single blow. He, however, watched the spectacle with pure admiration. A broad smile blossomed on his face, and he aloud marveled at the astonishing power of the magical emperor. His reaction left the crowd puzzled. People whispered that the white tiger was defeated, and that Ursel also came out for this training, and Jinbu proudly declared that this was the power of his master. But the official in the fur collar unleashed his anger on the bound Shuya, hissed that it was his merit, and regretted that if only Shuya had caught the tiger, they would have gained immense wealth and fame. He grabbed the young archer Shuya, demanded to know why the emperor mage was brought, and with distrust in his eyes asked if the hunters now worked as a team. He calmly says that since the hunters have nothing to defend themselves with, they must cover each other, fight protecting comrades. This is the way of this country. He waved it off, his face twisted with contempt, and accused Shuya of sending the hunters into danger just to satisfy his selfish desires. He gritted his teeth and resolutely declared that he would report all this to the guild. His chief froze in silence for a moment, then anger burst out. He did not understand how anyone could be so inept and how Shuya dared to talk to him like that. His tirade was interrupted by a female hunter who stepped forward and, shouting at him, reminded that they were asked to protect the country, asked if he really believed they cared only about themselves, and accused him of lying. Stunned by the frank audacity, the official trembled, and at that moment Klaus appeared nearby, calmly saying that he was only saying what Shia ordered him. A glowing magical circle appeared under the official's feet, an explosive trap. He looks down at the frightened man and declares that he will not allow him to interfere in the tiger hunt. Klaus says he will do everything necessary in his own way, and the official stammers in fear, uttering the name Magical Emperor. When the official was neutralized, Xia turns to Klaus and sincerely thanks him for dealing with that foolish duke and clearing their path to the white tiger, which lies exhausted on the ground in the forest. Klaus approaches the giant creature and places his palm on its broad back. Under his fingers appears a glowing magical symbol, and he begins to cast a powerful healing spell, Perfect Healing. When the spell worked, a faceted gem appeared on the tiger's forehead. In the flash of light, its eyes suddenly opened wide. The forced release of hidden magical power was complete. The white tiger is now fully alert. The new gem shines with bright light, and Klaus watches calmly. He knows the creature has regained consciousness. To his surprise, the tiger spoke. Its voice rang with ancient power, called him by his full name, Klaus Finley, and declared that he is its master in this life. When the bond was finally sealed, Klaus approached and firmly embraced the great beast. Apologizing for being late, the tiger gently rubbed its nose against him as a sign of acceptance. The white tiger tells Klaus that he is stubborn, then turns its attention to the nearby lizard companion Jinbu and notices that the familiar has too sharp a mouth for his kind. Continues, everyone can see that Klaus is its master. They offer a ride, but order Jinbu to disperse. Jinbu responds that the tiger must let everyone go because they are all servants of one master. He extended his hand, palms sank into the thick, soft fur of the white tiger. The beast stood proudly, its new gem gleaming, and addressing its new master, asked, "Isn't its coat the most luxurious of all?" A smile played on his face as he gently stroked the creature's head. The tiger declared that only Klaus is allowed to touch it, and this amusingly reminded him of his sister, Karen's possessive nature. He decisively mounted the huge beast's back again and shouted to those standing at the edge of the clearing, "All right, let's return to the city and report." On the main street of Huey Dent, Klaus Pat, the huge white tiger, tells the creature they have arrived, while he immediately plans to go to the local guild and tell everything. The street is teeming with people. He marvels at such a crowd, and nearby Shia Moslin aloud suggests, could all this commotion be because of him, as the bearer of the demon lord? Suddenly a man with slick-back blonde hair appeared and addressed him. "Your Highness, Alfred." Klaus froze in surprise, realizing he was face to face with the prince of this country. Alfred gestured to encourage Shia to relax, then turned to Klaus and asked him to tell everyone that in this official setting, it is not necessary to adhere so strictly to formalities. Alfred gently addressed Klaus. After all, he is a person like everyone else in this country, so he should be treated humanely, and added that the air here is so pleasant and refreshing, asking if Klaus feels the same. He explains his appearance, confessing that he heard the seal on the holy white tiger was under threat, and he hurried to figure it out. Looking at the calm animal next to Klaus, he smiles, noting that the tiger has already returned to its normal state. The prince was a little embarrassed and admitted that he was going to track down a daughter, but got distracted and sincerely thanked him. Klaus, moved, insisted that he just wants to be treated like any other citizen, and Alfred laughed and agreed to reconsider his approach. His expression becomes sincerely serious. He insists that Klaus saved the country, and for that he should be allowed to express at least minimal gratitude. Embarrassed by the royal gratitude, stammering, he uttered a simple, embarrassed response, "Yes, thank you." Accepting the invitation to the castle, they heard Klaus announce that he had something to report. He gestured toward the tied, sweating man nearby and named him Dukahan. Prince Alfred's face turned to stone as Klaus explained that the Duke used hunters for his own selfish ambitions. He sought to subjugate the white tiger and cause this holy creature needless pain. He explains that Dukahan tried to control the white tiger as a substitute for Shuya, and this truth twisted the Duke's face with panic. Suddenly, a young woman's voice cut through the tension. She stepped forward, addressed the Duke as father, and resolutely said that he used the hunters for his own purposes. She looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Do not justify Shuya," and sharply asked if he really realizes how useless he was. The Duke broke into a sweat and could not answer. Her appearance awakens a memory in Klaus. He realizes that this is the same princess he saved earlier, and nearby Shia adds that she is a good person who helped the hunters he was forced to abandon. The princess confidently turned her gaze to the group and said, "I vouch for him." She explains that Shia's actions were not at all what people imagined. Embarrassed by the praise, Shia stammers and says he was just trying to protect everyone. His reaction prompted Alfred to step forward. He praised him for a job well done, forgave old grievances, and declared that he was a true guardian, which made Shia freeze and blush. He turns his gaze to Duke Ahan and announces the verdict. The Duke is stripped of his title and exiled to his own lands with a strict prohibition never to step beyond their borders again. The disgraced Duke is led away. Others joyfully celebrate the just end. The princess happily takes Shia by the arm. Alfred friendly pats him on the back, and relief washes over everyone. Gathering his thoughts, Alfred said that they had suffered enough troubles for today, ordered to find lodging and rest, promising a worthy reward later. Klaus gratefully agreed. And their beastly companions, on the other hand, had a much more festive idea. The white tiger and the lizard, full of excitement, suggested holding a celebratory banquet that very night. Shia readily agrees, noting that this is a fitting celebration of the white tiger's return to the demon lord's capital, and the princess turns to Klaus and encourages him to relax and eagerly await the festivities. Their plans are interrupted by the sudden appearance of Ursula. He descends from above, addresses Klaus as the demon lord, tells him to stop what he is doing because it does not suit him, and then calls Klaus and Shulia to follow him in the direction. Klaus and Shia found themselves in a huge, luxurious ballroom sparkling under the light of a huge chandelier. Klaus's eyes opened wide in surprise. He could not believe the scale and splendor of this gathering. He stammers, admitting that it is his first time at such a party, and he feels completely out of place. Shia, noticeably more relaxed, notes that for him simply a lot of time has passed. Everyone turned their attention to a young woman descending the stairs. Klaus recognized her immediately, Princess Milia, admiringly marveling at how different and more beautiful she looked in her formal attire. She beams with a smile and loudly calls her older brother to look at her, and Klaus, confused by her radiance, can only think that Karen would be no less beautiful in such a dress. Shuya pulls him out of his dreams, accurately guessing that he was thinking about Karen, and with a sly smile pulls out a small rectangular communicator, surprising Klaus. He explains that a similar device was also delivered to where Karen was, and advises Klaus to try to contact her later. Klaus, filled with gratitude, accepts the device and sincerely thanks him. The silence was instantly broken by a crowd of aristocrats who suddenly surrounded Klaus, calling him Clausen, then nephew, and some even demon lordzima, and he stood in complete panic. The nobles pressed closer and bombarded him with questions from the world of rumors and legends. Someone asked if it was true that he brought Jinbu in some kind of storage bag, another whether he really defeated the Minotaur king himself. Klaus, sweating and with wide-open eyes, was trapped in the snare of his own fame. He staggered from the onslaught of attention, his vision blurred as the nobles crowded around him. Behind him, Shia and Ursel were simply asking him to hold on. One guest had mistaken him for the guild master. His mind raced with panic due to the number of people. He silently begged Selena for help and wondered where she could be. Suddenly, a strong hand grabbed him by the elbow and pulled him away from the throne. It was Princess Milia. She asked if he was okay, noticing that he clearly did not enjoy being the center of attention. Meanwhile, in the quiet courtyard of Huey Dent's castle, Selena stood alone and, speaking into the communicator, asked the person on the other end if she could really step away from the group. It was the voice of Karen. Finley, she had sat up in bed, filled with joy, and confessed that she had long wanted to talk to Selena, to which Selena responded with the same warmth. Walking through the rose garden under the moonlight, Selena explained that Klaus had given her that device, so that evening they could talk, and then said she had something she wanted to discuss. Karen's expression changed. A blush appeared on her cheeks. She looked at her device and went straight to the point. "Selena, you like my brother, don't you?" The sharp question caught Selena by surprise and left her speechless. Her face turned red, and the image of their first meeting appeared in her memory when she hugged her in tears. She apologizes for surprising Karen so much, explains that her feelings are somewhat different from romantic love, holding a small pendant in her hand, and clarifies that she feels more reverence. She continues through the connection, directly saying that Klaus is very important to her. Karen is completely confused. Her cheeks are burning. She stammers, trying to respond. She sits on the bed and tries to process it, thinking that Klaus is her important older brother, but in reality they are not related. A memory of a smiling classmate who is always nearby surfaces in Selena's mind. She thinks about what a wonderful thing love is, having grown for so many years. Returning to the conversation, she says to Karen with a bright smile that she adores such stories and eagerly asks to hear more, causing Karen to blush with embarrassment. Her face softens at the thought of how kind Klaus has become, and she tells Karen how happy she is to hear that. It seems that for Karen this is finally settled. She raises her gaze with new determination and tells Alina that she wants her and Klaus to be happy. Quiet mutual understanding flashes between them, and together they declare one goal: to definitely break the curse of the Oraberos. Karen nods decisively in agreement. She stopped abruptly, her eyes wide with surprise. A little further down the majestic arched corridor stood Klaus and a young woman she recognized, Princess Melia. Princess Melia led him to the door and, opening one, explained that it was a private room for the royal family's rest. He went inside, and his gaze immediately fell on the magnificent canopy bed. The luxury of this room, he thought, was in no way inferior to the chambers of the Lord of Demons himself. Settling on the plush sofa opposite the princess, who had changed into an elegant dress, he felt confused. She assured him that now they could talk for a long time, but he was at once grateful and embarrassed, wondering how everyone seemed to know about him and where to even begin explaining. Princess Milia smiled and explained that she learned this from Ursula and Alfred, and when she met Klaus in person, she was so impressed that she immediately understood the truth of their words. She said that as part of her education, to better know her country, her father ordered her to live and behave like a huntress, and it was in this role that she came across rumors about the guardian beast, believed them, and asked Shia to join the Duke Ahan's conquest squad. Her face became gloomy at the thought of the archer. She mentally regretted not trying to understand him earlier, perhaps then she could have stopped him. Turning her gaze back to Klaus, she sincerely smiled and thanked him everyone was safe only because he and his companions arrived on time. She continues, explaining that she was completely captivated by his healing magic, his character, and how he values his comrades. She boldly declares that she is convinced he is the only one who can be her partner, and Klaus recoils in shock, his mind spinning from the word partner. She leaned closer, her cheeks flaming with blush and hope, and whispered for him to accept her, and he just looked back, sweating and completely confused by the sudden proposal. He lowered his gaze, stammering and apologizing. Although he sincerely values her feelings, he explains that he never even thought about marriage and is not able to do it now. Despite his refusal, she pushes him back onto the bed, leans over him and offers, "If not now we can still do it, would that be a problem?" While she was speaking, already having her father's permission, the door suddenly creaked and opened. His heart pounds in his chest, panic rises he realizes how terrible it looks. Pressed by the princess at the very moment someone enters, and Milio whispers his name, and thoughts race in his head, who could it be? A familiar voice cut through the tension, "Brother." Klaus raises his head, eyes wide with horror. He understands that his sister Karen has just entered and caught them in a compromising scene. Klaus wakes up in bed and sees Princess Milia next to him. Frightened, he raises his eyes to her as she calls him by name, and a communicator lies on the nearby table. He barely had time to recover when she suddenly rushed and hugged him tightly. With a bright, determined look, she introduced herself as Milia, the first princess of the kingdom of Hugh Dent, and boldly declared that she would become his sister. The moment is interrupted by a voice from the communicator. Karen appears on the screen wearing a mask, her eyes wide open in shock, demanding to know what her brother is doing, while a confused Klaus tells her to wait, realizing that everything looks terrible. He instantly turned his gaze from the screen to Princess Milia, panicking over the terrible timing. He apologizes fervently, explaining that although he has no excuse, he would never allow his sister to hate him. She catches his sincere plea, her face softening with understanding. She assures him that she understands and admits she also does not want to lose her dear family. Determination returns. She tells him that although she is leaving for now, she does not intend to give up. She adds that she does not want to be disliked, and that will not stop her. He tells her that he cannot worry about anything else, only about how to lift his sister's curse. As she leaves, he invites her to use the room freely and returns to the device, his face filled with mad determination, calling Karen to wait and promising to fix everything. At the other end of the connection, Karen's face is a mask of icy rage. She looks from the screen with a piercing gaze, demanding to know who that princess is. In a small window, Klaus recoils in horror, realizing that his sister is now in a truly terrible mood. The brother's voice through the device continued to tell how he was surrounded at the party, and then rescued, adding that he heard about his fate from the princess herself. She listened attentively as he continued, aloud asking how nobles from another country could have learned about him. She remained silent, absorbing his story. His face appeared on the screen, and he admitted it was he who asked Ursula to publicize his achievements. His eyes widened with tension, and he asked why they were treating him like a criminal. Finally, she answered, explaining that if his reputation grows, he will stand out, and she finds that unpleasant. Despite this, she admitted that she wants to be a support for him and believes that over time everyone will start to see him in a positive light. She gripped the communication device tighter in her hands and said sadly that since she cannot be with him, this is the least she can do to support him. She seemed touched by her confession, told her how kind she is, and declared that she is the most important person in the world, damn it. A blush spread across her cheeks as she listened to his sincere words. Earlier, the anger completely disappeared. A radiant smile blossomed on her face. Clutching the device, she joyfully exclaimed that she feels the same. She says that from now on they will be in touch every day, noticing that he works at the reception, asks him to rest well, and after the last good night their conversation quietly fades. The conversation ended, and Klaus, with a heavy sigh, collapsed onto the bed. He thought that he wanted to ask her to stop spreading rumors about him. As if someone is stealing his determination. But if that is so, he realizes then, he will have to work very hard to live up to the reputation she created. Later that night, after the party ended, he cautiously peeks out from the door, checking if it is safe to return to his dwelling. Under the starry sky, he returns all the way back and, approaching, announces his return aloud. In his room, he finds a white tiger and Ouroboros on the bed, waiting for him. The tiger greets him and explains that it was just about to doze off while waiting, then orders Klaus to touch the precious stone to contact Cecil. Following the instruction, Klaus reaches out and touches the object. Suddenly, a dazzling flash bursts from it, and the object shatters into countless fragments. Delight transports him to another place, where he finds himself before ancient ruins alongside Ursel, Princess Milia, Shia Moslin, and others. Ursel says that this is the sanctuary of Lemmu. Stunned, Klaus clenches his jaws and becomes stern determined to resolve this matter as soon as possible to return home. He and his companions appeared in a huge semi-ruined hall, where leaning columns stretched into the darkness. Before them loomed a monstrous multi-headed dragon, its giant body entwined to Jews, one of its heads lowered, its reptilian eyes aimed at the small group, as if laughing at such fragile people, and demanded to know their purpose. The appearance of the beast brought pure terror within him. He recognized it, the evil dragon Oraberos. The very ominousness of its magical power suffocated, and although fear almost paralyzed him, another force flared in his chest, fierce determination to destroy this creature. Suddenly, a powerful force burst forth in the chamber. The dragon laughed dully and thunderously, and its laughter echoed off the broken stones. Klaus's companions were confused, struggling to maintain balance amid the chaos, and the beast proudly boasted. Its voice dripped with contempt. It declared they were the last, and mockingly asked what they would do now. The desperate situation pierced his memory. He imagined himself as Cecil, calling a young woman named Marin to flee, begging her to run, even if she was supposed to be the only one who could escape. She turned to him, and on her face was a sadness mixed with tenderness. Gently smiling, she asked him, "Please, take care of the children," and her last words were a simple and sincere confession of love. The memory reached a terrible climax. He helplessly watched as blinding energy rushed through space and tore Marin and another young girl from him, and in his head sounded his own voice, shouting her name with a desperate, futile cry as they disappeared. She froze as the colossal dragon before him began to glow, its body wrapped in ethereal bands of light. A powerful spell appeared in the chamber, the Eternal Seal. The seal did not hold. With a terrible crack, the dragon's huge jaws clenched, breaking the magical constraint. From the breach burst a fragment of dark energy, and Klaus covered his eyes from the flash. When the dragon's powers broke free, another presence appeared, a creature of pure whiteness, with a mane and tail of celestial flame materialized and froze, standing with unearthly grace, and from beneath the mask rose a horn twisted in a spiral. The appearance of that new creature caused a flood of memories in Klaus, returning him to another time, another tragedy. He became a child again, eyes wide with horror, and his voice trembled as he shouted the name. He remembered that beast from that day, its name whispered in his head. Crew, he and Marin were only children, trapped in the very center of a vortex of power howling around them. The memory became sharper and more painful. He fell to his knees, beating the ground in despair and shouting the name Marin, while the crushing weight of his own helplessness hung over him, a feeling he never forgot. He turned his tear-streaked face to the beast, his voice choked with sobs. He apologized and promised never to leave him alone again, while Marin lay motionless on the cold ground nearby. As the boy wept, an invisible figure bent down and stretched out a hand, its palm grasping the fallen star-shaped object, and the figure felt the pure, strong magic emanating from it. The beast Ku turned its gaze to the boy in the cloak, a silent witness to the echoes of the past. Ursula's uncontrollable loud laughter pulls him out of his memories, and Klaus just freezes in disbelief, murmuring whether it is really possible. The laughter turns into a severe coughing fit from the red-haired man nearby, whom Klaus barely supports. When the man hoarsely utters the name, Albert, Ursula raises the glowing star-shaped thing, and its light intensifies. The scene dissolves into another memory. Klaus stands with Marin before the mythical beast crew. The memory shifts, the crowd greets him with applause. After he sealed the Ouroboros, people began calling him Cecil, leader of the demon slayers, and everyone celebrated. The weight of past glory and present crisis crashes down on him. Tears stream down his face, and he gasps for breath. A voice calls his name, trying to reach him through this turmoil. His mind dives deeper into the past, to a time when he was a boy, sick in bed, beside him a small tiger-striped creature, Kylin. He weakly asks if the master is suffering from pain somewhere, and when Kylin confirms, he says with relief that it's good they knew and could help. It turned out that Kylin was the familiar of Saint Marin. A familiar exists to contain the power of its saint, and Kylan's role was to become a direct seal against Ouroboros, but since his power was not yet mature, he was told he was needed only for purification. The memory returns again to the boy with hands folded in prayer. He gives thanks, acknowledging that Kylin protected them all from Ouroboros, and with fervent hope begs for the protection of a young girl named Karen. His prayer seems to echo in the boundless empty sky, and a barely audible, sad apology hangs in the air. On a city street, Klaus walks with a book in his hands, and the small tiger familiar Kylin is perched on his arm. Suddenly, his former boss Fowl appears before him and angrily shouts that Klaus has already bought enough, insisting they return to the group, and grumbling that the magical teleportation device is too expensive and an ordinary carriage would have been enough. He grabs Klaus by the shoulder and impatiently calls out his name. Klaus remains silent and stands aside from Fowl and his two subordinates, who watch from behind. The Falsmen were already dragging Klaus back to the magical core when suddenly a powerful shockwave burst and swept him away. While Princess Milia stood with her hand outstretched, she was the source of that protective magic. The sudden intervention left behind a foul hissing and complete confusion, as if demanding to understand what was happening. His subordinates, recovering from the explosion, angrily ask who this young woman is. Calmly, she asks if they tried to kidnap Klaus, explaining that his amazing presence attracted her, and she followed him, then, casting them a critical glance, says they are inept for not recognizing his true worth. Her commanding words silenced the man. Klaus, standing behind, sighed with relief, grateful for her unexpected recovery. He stumbled and fell to the ground, raising his eyes to her in surprise, while Kylin sits down nearby. Princess Milia looks down at him and politely asks permission to help him with his sister. Her face softened and a bright, encouraging smile lit up it. She enthusiastically suggests searching for Kylin together, and Klaus, now holding both the little tiger and the turtle-like Jinbu, lifts his eyes to her with a glimmer of hope in his gaze. He carefully studies the map, relying on Princess Milia's hints. Their companion Alfred confirms his suspicions. For the first time, he senses Kylin's magical presence nearby. Preparing for the search, Klaus thanks Alfred for providing them with the latest model of long-distance communication devices. Milia accepts this as a faculty matter and says there is nothing unusual about it. When the communication devices are already in place, Klaus gives the order to move out. Alfred commands the group, which now includes the dark-haired traveler, to scatter and each individually comb their area, and she readily agrees. As she herself was making her way through the dense forest, a sudden rustle in a nearby bush made her sharply turn toward the sound. Her eyes widen in amazement when she sees what is before her. Touching the communicator near her ear, she whispers that she has found what they were looking for. Before her, in a puddle of water, stands a shining mythical creature glowing with ethereal energy. The adventurer's face tightened with determination. She thinks they have finally met, quietly whispers an inaudible word to her mother, and says that now it is her turn, ready to fulfill her duty. The burden of the saint, standing before the tavern, Selena intently looks at the small object in her hand. Her face unwavering, she has accepted her fate and gathered the resolve to become Kylin, thinking that this is a burden she must bear alone, a message for Klaus. Meanwhile, Alfred sincerely spoke to Selena, asking permission for him and his friends to stay nearby in case she needs them. She, a little tired, thanked him and apologized for the trouble she causes Hector. Dr. Klaus enthusiastically talks with Karen and tells her that he asked Selena for help. Karen beams, clenching her fists. She is happy both for Selena and for her own involvement. In a moment of solitude, Selena raises her eyes, a faint but determined smile on her face. Just a little more, she thinks. Deep in the forest, Klaus rides a white tiger. In the distance, he notices a figure and shouts, "I found her." The tiger urges him on, "Sit," and faster. As they approach, Klaus's thoughts race. He does not know how he will even obtain Iroko, the very scale. He knows he must try. Ahead, he sees Selena's silhouette, shrouded in a dark, ominous aura. Suddenly, from where Selena stood, a blinding flash of light exploded, and Klaus covered his eyes. From the glow in the puddle appeared a small white mythical beast with a horned, mask-like face and a blazing mane. What is this light?" Klaus exclaimed, stunned. The shock recedes, recognition appears on his face. "Kylin," he shouts. Without hesitation, he gives the order. "White tiger, hold him back with your lightning." The large animal lets out a powerful roar, as if confirming the order, and prepares to strike. He watched as Kylin burst forward at incredible speed, a blurred white figure in a whirl of flames. The white tiger and Oraberos felt his speed and power, and nearby the adventurer explained that the saint has now mastered Kylin's magic, and asked if Klaus intends to catch this creature. In response, he shouted to Kylin, then gave an order to his comrades, "You too, please," and sent the white tiger and little Jinbu rushing forward to intercept that mythical creature. As soon as his guards approached the target, the swordswoman with the scythe flashed past them, rushing upward. Catching Kylin on the fly, she instantly disappeared into the sky. She looked with distrust and shouted that it could fly. The woman nearby had a plan she asked for some time, promised to catch Kylin and bring him his scale. All she needed was his trust. Klaus, looking at her determined face, agreed. The swordswoman with a braided braid sat down nearby and remarked on Kylin's magic. Turning to Klaus with a gentle smile, she apologized and waved it off, saying her interference meant nothing, and Klaus was stunned by her ease. A hideout in the nearby thickets, the traveler and the white tiger watched the exchange. While they watched, Kylin rose again, and only one thought echoed in his mind. mother. The next day they arrived at the town of Hugh Dent, and Klaus looked at one of its buildings, sincerely grateful for the help received. She returned to Princess Milia and noticed her gloomy mood. He calmed her, told her not to worry, and promised he would return. When he tries to calm her, the archer Shuya firmly grabs his hand. Princess Milia, with eyes full of tears, asks why her father does not allow Shuya to cross the border with him, and Shuya interrupts, saying that as a guardian he must protect both the holy beast and the demon lord. He smiles warmly and readily agrees, saying, "Of course." Princess Milia looks up at him, her eyes pleading. She asks him not to forget her. A blush spreads across her face. She suddenly realizes she has already gotten used to his presence. They exchanged farewells. The group passes through the city gates. Princess Milia stays behind and waves to them until they disappear from sight. The journey takes them out of the city into a lush forest, and thanks to the kindness of Duke Sarek, they ride with companions, mounted on massive adamantite forms and the white tiger. During their trip, the swordswoman with braids told Klaus that the Cloud family lives here and has stayed, then asked if everything was okay, because he seemed not to have even noticed they were in Woodville. She talks about Terald, a country generously gifted by nature. Thanks to this, it is almost completely self-sufficient and lives quite closed off, hardly trading with other countries. He asks his companion if it is even possible to enter such a country. The woman with the headband explains that entry to Terald is too difficult since the founding of Cynifolia. Only the most noble house Dukel and the guardians of the holy beasts have special permission to stay there, and even the authority of the great saint cannot grant them passage. Nearby, Shia looks ahead and feels that there are other problems. Following his gaze, they see their goal on the horizon. A voice announces they have reached Reincarnated. On the shore nearby stand the sacred guardian and the sacred beast Jinbu, intently watching across the water at the mountainous island country. While their boat quietly glides over the water, Klaus and his companions look closer at the approaching land. Impatience was written on their faces. He walks through the magnificent traditional gates, and his eyes involuntarily rise upward inside. The unique city architecture draws the eye, and gentle petals quietly swirl in the air. Inside, a local man approaches them, and looking at their clothes, says he has never seen anything like it. Klaus and the woman with the headband gaze into the city, enchanted by its beauty and strangeness. They walk, and he notices that the streets are almost entirely filled with men. Suddenly, a strange reluctance to walk ahead of another man flashes through his mind. The guide, as if reading his unspoken thought, says that as foreigners they are being closely watched here. Nearby stand two stern men who are intently observing. Their gazes are piercing. He remained tense and told Ursel that there was something off about the town's atmosphere, especially regarding Selena, but his companions seemed unaware of this and cheerfully declared that they had found someone named Sakura. As if responding to her name, a young woman in a floral kimono lifted her eyes from the stone path. Petals swirled around her, and she solemnly addressed him, Demon Lord Klaus Finley, introducing herself as the guardian of the Blue Dragon. He rushed to her side, earnestly asking her to stand and value her life, and she, surprised by his concern, listened as he explained that he was uncomfortable with such overly respectful treatment and asked her to simply treat him as an equal. Moved by his kindness, she called him a magnanimous host and properly introduced herself Sakura Ferris, keeper of the holy beast. Klaus could not help but notice a slight resemblance to Jinbu and wondered if she was yet another guardian from a distant foreign land. After the introductions, Ursel urged him to move on. The group ascended the long stone stairs to a traditional estate surrounded by a bamboo fence. They arrived at the residence and soon settled on the open veranda, beginning a conversation with the inhabitants. During the conversation, Ursel asked Sakura if she had servants. She replied no, and Klaus interjected, noting that the city seemed to be inhabited only by men, and inquired why that was so. She explained that in Terald it was taken for granted. Men worked outside and women protected the home. She admitted that because of this strict social structure, women from foreign lands like herself were considered outsiders. As she spoke, Ursel smiled and remarked that Sakura was an incredibly skilled guardian. He was sure she should be sent on any outdoor task, and Klaus agreed, honestly admitting that he and his companions simply could not endure the constant stares of the locals. She was served a cup of steaming tea, and she thought that in her native country, women like Karen and Selena also worked similarly, but here their work went unnoticed. Despite this, she really liked the local tea. Her face lit up with a radiant smile, as if surrounded by the illusion of Sakura. She said the tea was delicious and that she might get used to it, while from a short distance Klaus and Karen observed her sincere joy. He looked at her and realized that despite all her sternness, Sakura was strangely gentle. Sakura admitted that although she was accustomed to the local customs, she was still torn by a deep sadness that no one noticed her efforts. Just as Ursel began to speak about the blue dragon, the ground shook with a heavy impact. A colossal creature with dark fur landed with tremendous force right near the veranda, frightening everyone. From the commotion appeared a man with long, spiky light hair and a sly smile he called Sakura, saying he had made her wait and that it was time to go meet the demon lord, and Sakura raised her eyes in shock and exclaimed, "Rahaku, why are you here? I thought the reception was already over." In response, Rihak spread a pair of magnificent feathered wings and apologized for being late. Stunned by what he saw, Klaus began introducing himself as a representative of the Lord of Demons. He froze when his companion bowed and introduced himself Rahaku Gilburn, the first prince of the kingdom of Ringgold. The confused Klaus shyly thanked him for his courtesy, and Rahaku smiled warmly and suggested they switch to informal address, as it was more natural for him. While they stood, Sakura quietly offered to prepare a cup of tea for Ahak. She gently places her hand on his shoulder, a quiet touch to get his attention. Answering, Rahak turns to her with a reassuring smile and tells her not to worry. Then he asks if he can borrow a child. Rahaku and Sakura walk together, while Klaus watches them silently, quietly wondering why the prince asked for it himself. Later, everyone sat together, and Ursel explained with a worried voice the seriousness. The blue dragon must not be awakened under any circumstances. He hoped to study Kylin's healing magic, but the pursuit of the creature was stopped, and Sakura added that because of the appearance of the blue dragon, people have been forbidden to enter the mountains for several days. When everything was decided, Ursel announced that their group would set out to find Kylin and officially asked Klaus and his companions for cooperation. Klaus immediately and willingly agreed. Ursel's face became serious, and he asked the crucial question, was their journey really a race against time? He raises his gaze, a drop of sweat glistens on his forehead, and hesitantly confirms Ursula's conclusion. Having accepted his answer, Ursel acknowledges the situation, apologizes for today, turns and leaves the room, his thoughts turning on the way out to how problematic this country is, while Klaus remains anxiously wondering what just happened. In the quiet Rheingold Inn, Klaus sat in deep concentration, a bouquet of flowers lying nearby, and his thoughts were consumed by a single goal to expel the Ouroboros curse. He relentlessly pondered a particular healing magic, believing that it would finally save his sister Karen. He plucks a flower from the bouquet, a mixture of hope and apology on his face. Thanks to training with Morris, the mage, his control over magic has significantly strengthened, and he feels a surge of confidence, believing that he will finally succeed as a complex magical sign materializes over the delicate flower. His thoughts drift to Karen. He imagines her weakened, her hands wrapped in dark marks of the ailment. He understands that this flower is the closest analog to her curse. Focusing to the limit, he directs magic into the stem, deliberately altering the wavelengths to mimic the life-draining property, and the flower petrifies with a clear click. This experiment is the culmination of many sleepless hours spent with texts. He carefully studied the curse, noticing how it seems to block the very vessels of life, like a clot in a blood vessel. Having completed the magical scan of the afflicted flower, he prepares for the next decisive step. Now he must infuse his own healing magic into the cursed object, a delicate and dangerous task, and a soft light begins to glow from his palm. A blinding flash of light bursts from his hands as he releases the power, but he quickly realizes, simply pouring magic into the flower is not enough. He needs to extract and expel the sinister energy of the curse, yet the flower stubbornly remains petrified, like a witness to the heaviness of his struggle. Somewhere on a soft pillow lies a magical communication device, and through it Klaus's voice sounds firm, unwavering. He will do it for Karen, relying only on himself, not on Kylin. In her room, Karen clutches the device, anxiety on her face from the sudden silence, her heart aching with the desire to see her brother, and suddenly a troubling thought flashes through her mind. If they are not bound by blood, will he still consider her his dear sister? The nervous reaction over the communicator hit Klaus with a wave of panic. He froze, staring at the device, and, overwhelmed with anxiety, shouted apologies to Karen. In her room, Karen quickly recovered, explaining that it was late and she had fainted for a moment, and with a gentle smile recalled that she used to say that in childhood. With a sigh, she complained that 24 hours a day is not enough at all, and remembered how desperately she worked to master healing magic. He chuckled, his voice sounding through the device, and he admitted that he remembered recalling her childhood declaration that she wanted to become his bride, thinking how sincere and sweet Karen was then. Hearing this, Karen puffed her cheeks in playful indignation and replied that she was no longer just sweet, she had become strong and beautiful. Then she quietly added, her cheeks flushed with a blush, then she belonged only to him. It seemed she did not feel the weight of her words. She simply advised not to overexert and said good night. Karen began to respond but froze, and the thought remained unspoken. The line went dead. She suddenly shuddered, her face flushed when she understood his words. What does this mean? She thought, burying her face in the pillow. A terrible thought blossomed in her mind. Was this his true intention? She tossed in bed, completely confused. The thought that if she had confessed, he might have just accepted it without any fuss, stuck in her head and would not let go. She sat up straight and tensely when suddenly a new, urgent thought pierced her. Could he not even suspect that they are not related by blood? The realization hit her with stunning force. She definitely had to find out. Klaus tells his friends that Kalana has not been found yet, but his ability to fly is a truly invaluable aid in their search. Ursel listens with a tired face, and Alfred remains steadfast. As they moved through the forest, Serafina announced their arrival and suddenly caught Klaus. While behind, Ursel told the others that involving the blue dragon would greatly expand the search area, to which there was a resolute agreement. The place turned out to be a breathtaking waterfall cascading from a steep cliff. Serafina exclaimed in admiration at the beauty. Klaus repeated, and sadly added that he really wished Karen could see it too. Serafina turned to him and noticed how deeply he cares about Karen. He gave a gentle smile and a simple, sincere yes. In a moment, while they stood frozen in the clearing, Kylin suddenly roared. He sensed an unfamiliar presence, and Klaus, despite the interruption, remained focused and insisted that the blue dragon was nearby. His words were immediately confirmed. From the surrounding forest burst forth a majestic blue dragon, a powerful and breathtaking sight. At the creature's appearance, Ursel stepped forward with enthusiasm and announced he would cast a spell to bring down the dragon. Klaus reacted with fear. He did not feel hostility in the animal, only pure magical energy, while Kylin urgently called his master. Before he could react, Sakura and Rahako stood between the group, and the dragon Rahako announced they would be the bait. Sakura drew her blade, and the blue dragon attacked. Serafina watched in horror, fearing the damage one strike could cause. Klaus froze in shock, and Ouroboros shouted that his magic was ceasing to work and wondered if the dragon had gone mad. He watches as Sakura, with a threatening smile, unleashes a powerful sword technique she calls Absolute Sky, and ordering the blue dragon to fall to the ground, Rahaku hovers in the air above, relentlessly approaching the beast. A strike of such force sends the dragon tumbling through the sky, and it lets out a cry of pain. Klaus freezes in awe, unable to believe she wields such a huge sword so easily. Alfred shouts approval, and Rahaku orders Jinbu to protect everyone on the ground. He realizes that his ability to detach consciousness is useless because he cannot establish direct contact with the dragon. He understands that Sakura and Rahaku are acting in tandem, luring the beast down from its towering height. Nearby, Alpha confirms this strategy. Seizing the chance, he pushed the white tiger forward, shouted for it to move now, ordered the beast not to take its eyes off the blue dragon, and shouted that they would meet it together. The giant creature responded, leaping powerfully into the air. He stands firmly on its back, arms outstretched, preparing to make his move. But as soon as he closed the distance, the blue dragon let out a deafening roar. The force of the blast knocked him down. He screamed. A magical symbol lit up on his hand, and his consciousness darkened, lost in the darkness. The stunned white tiger falls from the sky, and even before it hits the ground, the blue dragon grabs the falling tiger with its mighty jaws, while below Alfred watches in horror and speaks of the audacious power of the demon lord. The dragon's eyes are empty. Alfred shouts that its consciousness has not returned, and to everyone's horror, the beast swallows the white tiger's maw. Sakura screams Klaus's name in terror as she, Rahaku, and Jinbu witness this horror. Inside the beast's belly, Klaus finds himself surrounded by the poisoned magic of the blue dragon, sees that it resembles the miasma he has encountered before, and realizes it must be cleansed urgently. He apologizes for the pain he will have to cause, and decides to forcibly restore the dragon's magic with his own strength. As soon as he makes the decision, a glowing symbol appears on his hand. Finishing scanning the dragon's energy, he cannot shake the thought of the voice that just sounded. With a determined cry, he releases his power, initiating a forced restoration of magic that envelops the raging creature in dazzling light. The spell works instantly. Outside, the white tiger is safely expelled from the blue dragon's jaws. The dragon itself, now cleansed and shining, peacefully soars through the sky, and Rahaku and others watch in disbelief, unable to believe if it has truly regained consciousness. Now, sitting on the back of the calmed blue dragon, Klaus solemnly declares himself its new master and gently whispers to the creature that everything is all right and that it is no longer alone. The dragon looks at him, its eyes filling with tears of relief and gratitude. Filled with joy, the blue dragon gently rubbed Klaus's nose and said that he had long dreamed of meeting him, because since Ouroboros was taken away, he had felt very lonely. Klaus calmed the great beast, stroked its muzzle, and praised it for enduring so long. The dragon gently continued to show his affection, finally proving that Klaus was his master. Klaus calmed him once again, wondering to himself how emotional this beast was and that it was not at all like when it used to rage before, and again pondered whose voice it was that sounded before he cast the spell. When they descended back to the ground, Klaus turned to Sakura and praised her, calling her sword dance beautiful. Embarrassed, Sakura blushed and firmly stated that it was not worthy of praise, while nearby Rahaku watched them with a knowing smile. He returned to the gathered group Rihaku, Sakura, Alfred, Serafina, and the holy beasts and sincerely thanked them for their help. Then he approached Rahaku directly, and the partner recognized him as Klaus Dono, admitting that he already knew about him and asked for a favor. He looked at Klaus with burning determination and made a request. He asked if Klaus would join him to change this country. The sudden proposal stunned Klaus, and he quickly told Sakura to wait. She, in response, looked at Rahaku with distrust, asking what he was saying. In a moment, they were sitting opposite each other, with the newly tamed blue dragon resting nearby. Klaus admitted that the harsh customs and entrenched mentality of the country weighed heavily on his thoughts. Rahaku caught every word and quietly said that Klaus was a prince, so he had not yet been spoiled by the deeply rooted habits of the peoples. Seeing this, Klaus made a decision. If Prince Rahaku really intended to act, he was ready to provide full support, although he wondered how exactly they would accomplish it. Rahaku admitted that he had long tried to change everything on his own and was already on the verge of failure. His face hardened as he revealed his true, resolute plan. He wanted Klaus to join him to overthrow the current king of their country. Imagining the stern monarch, Rahaku vowed to change the country at any cost. In Rahaku's mind, thoughts merged into one treacherous goal to overthrow the king. An unspoken determination hung in the air, while Sakura gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. Shock was felt in the air, but Klaus stepped forward to meet the prince resolutely, saying that he could not accept Sakura's situation, and demanded an explanation of why Rahaku was considering rebellion, insisting that one should never get used to such a thing. He turns back, his face hardening with conviction. Rahaku explains that he had long felt something was deeply wrong with their country, and his own mother was pushed away just because she was a foreigner. This stunned Sakura. She suddenly cursed with a question why Prince Rahaku, and even Klaus, got involved in such a matter, and Klaus, still reeling from the news, asked himself, why would Rahaku serve the princess if his own father disapproved of his mother? Rahaku's thoughts returned again to his father, King Terald. He remembered that despair. The king repeatedly begged his own mother to accept Rahaku, but all his requests were rejected. Memory fades, the group falls silent, as if everything has already been said. The government is the same, and both Oraberos and Klaus's squad were asked to carry out the mission of subjugation. Clenching his fists and digging into the ground beneath his feet, Rahaku shouts that, for the sake of his mother and women like Sakura, he intends to stage a coup. He threw himself to the ground and bowed his head low in a gesture of deep submission, realizing that his request was audacious, but still begged Klaus and his companions to help him change the country. Laos, with a stern face, acknowledges the prince's determination and says, as before, he is ready to help here. Hearing this, Rahaku's face lights up, and he turns to his companions. Sakura Ferris enthusiastically says that when Prince Rahaku becomes the new king, they will gradually change the country. Rahaku agrees but asks to act quickly. He cannot stay long, so they must come up with a plan immediately. They gathered inside. He explains to the group that his words no longer reach his father the king, so he wants to borrow Klaus's authority, believing that the king might listen to the words of the demon lords. Sakura grimly warns, if their request is rejected, they will have to fight the whole country, and it will be a brutal battle for Klaus and his friends. Rahaku agrees but adds that they have a loophole. Rahaku looks intently outside, identifying his target, the most powerful general in the nation's history. Rahaku declares that he will defeat him with one decisive strike. Later that night, under the crescent moon, Klaus stood on the veranda and thoughtfully wondered how he agreed to this, when behind him Ursula called him, and Kylin settled on his shoulder. He explains to Ursula his choice. If he is asked to help as the Lord of Demons, he must respond. Nearby, Rahaku adds that he cannot tolerate a world where people are not recognized for their true worth, and that Aizen's defeat will break the armies fighting Spirit Alpha, and Ursula agree, so this becomes the heart of their strategy. She listens, Sakura's eyes widen slightly, the former suffering look of the great saint comes to mind, and she finally realizes the full seriousness of the situation. Haruhako stands and watches as the blue dragon wraps around Klaus's shoulders, mentally noting that the young man has truly grown. Under the starry sky, an invisible man sighs and complains, "Where is my boss? He doesn't listen to me. What a tiring situation this is." The frame sharply shifts us to the towering castle Renarudo, its multi-tiered figure rising into the sky. Blue dragon soars into the sky, now colossal in size, and Klaus confidently sits on its back. Below, a crowd of Taro soldiers points upward with disbelief, one shouting that it is the blue dragon and someone is riding it. The giant beast fell with a roar onto the castle courtyard, raising clouds of dust, and unshaken, stood before the stunned guards. He clenches his fist, gathers his courage. He must hold himself with dignity and grandeur. He stepped forward and with a voice that tolerated no objections, addressed the soldiers. "I am Klaus Finley. I brought the mad blue dragon to its senses and came because I must confirm one thing with the king." The guards part, whispers fill the air as he relentlessly walks through their ranks toward the main keys. He looked ahead with unwavering determination, and his voice rang out as a clear command. make way. At his command, the Terrell guards part, opening a path for him. He confidently strides between their ranks. He froze. A voice addressed him and confirmed. Yes, as the great saint wrote in the letter, he truly became convinced of the existence of the demon emperors. A man in luxurious robes kneels before him, places his hand on the sword hilt, and names himself Eisencroud, a general serving the country Terrell. He looked down at the kneeling general and coldly stated that this was not at all the reception he had expected. He only needed to get an audience with the king. Eisencroud raises his eyes and assures him that everything is clear. He explains that he has already delivered the message to His Majesty and apologizes if it seemed rude. With formalities behind them, he stood up and gestured toward the open castle doors, inviting Klaus to follow him, while a small blue dragon peeking over Klaus's shoulder watched with nervous admiration. Meanwhile, from afar a group watches. Alfred, peering through a spyglass, smiles with relief and says that Klaus is safe, and nearby Lin Xiaomoe worries and notes how much Klaus now stands out. He looks at the distant castle and says that this will make it easier for them to act and get ahead of his father, and Alpha asks Shuya if he is ready to follow Prince Rahaku, adding that Klaus has already arrived at the castle and the signal must be sent. As the plans began to unfold, Sakura Ferris was engulfed in her own thoughts. The image of a man from a foreign land surfaced in her memory. He loved his wife but also had many other women, and she decided not to allow things to remain as they were, as Klaus had warned. Her determination met Shuya's grim, steel resolve. He said he hoped to support Prince Rahaku without bloodshed, but if the king did not change, he would have to insist, and he sternly promised that if it came to that, he himself would behead his father. After that, he urged them to move. At that very moment, at the grand gates of Reynolds Castle, the guard's voice thundered, announcing the arrival of the demon Emperor Klaus Finley. He was led down a long corridor into a huge reception hall, where in the distance, a solitary figure awaited him. A man with a noticeable topknot stepped out, smiled broadly, and introduced himself as Asrabakaka from the Kingdom of Reynolds. He solemnly thanked Klaus for taming the sacred beast. Asrabakaka informed him that a banquet was arranged in his honor and asked him to rest a little, but Klaus refused. He did not need a banquet. He had to confirm something much more important. His gaze ran over the assembled court, and he directly asked if they knew that Sakura Ferris, the Blue Dragon's guard, lived in such conditions where she was simply unnoticed and uncared for. He concludes his speech before the Court of Tricks and loudly says that for a woman like Sakura, their current attitude is exactly the reaction to be expected from his country. In response, Asrabakaka tries to reach him, insisting that the important role protecting her is essentially a man's job, and asks Klaus, as the Lord of Demons, if he understands this basic principle. The official's contemptuous words ignite a flash of rage in Klaus, and he realizes with horror that his important companion was hidden just because she is a woman. Unmoved by his reaction, Asrabakaka continues, "This is simply a custom of their country that people have accepted," and asks if Klaus is really convinced by this explanation. He waved off the official's excuses with a bored expression, turned his head, and called a completely different name Prince Rahaku. As if on command, the huge doors of the chamber opened. Prince Rahaku entered accompanied by his retinue, and Asrabakeka looked distrustfully as the prince addressed him and said that, as ordered, he delivered the message of the demon lord. Rahaku steps forward and displays a stack of documents, explaining that they contain testimonies and investigation reports about how Sakura was treated from the day she arrived, as well as petitions from other women who want to work. The court hall erupts with shouts, demanding evidence and rejecting the papers. The challenge shook the calm of Asrabakaka. He roared that women are obedient children, no better than cattle, and should stay at home and be silent. Hearing this, Rahaku looked at his father with deep disappointment and said, "What a shame." He raised his voice, and his words thundered through the hall. After the removal of Asrabakaka, the first Prince Rahaku Gilvern will now take the throne as the new king of Ratalu. The word struck the father like a physical blow, and Asraba opened his eyes wide with pure, undiluted rage. His face twisted. He broke out in sweat and could not comprehend the audacity of this move. Shock recedes, giving way to explosive rage. "You are a disgrace," he growls, pointing with a trembling finger. He orders the royal guard to immediately seize the audacious offenders. By the king's order, the guards simultaneously draw their blades, the sharp ring of steel cutting through the air as they close a tight circle around Klaus, Rahaku, and their companions. Surrounded, Klaus turns to Rahaku and calmly says that since his father made the first move, he will clear the enemies in the castle. Rahaku agrees to take on the others, and they arrange to meet in the courtyard. Plans are ready. Klaus shouted the name, Blue Dragon, and ordered all allied soldiers to immediately descend into the courtyard. The great beast instantly responds to the master's call, bursts into the throne room, scatters the guards, and throws the entire courtyard into chaos, while Rahaku stands mesmerized. Blue dragon breaks through the building's facade, and Klaus and Rihaku jump onto its back. Asrabakatka shouts for them to wait, but they are already airborne, leaving destruction and rebellion behind. In the new unfamiliar courtyard, Klaus calls his allies, shouting the names of two sacred beasts, Jinbu and Bayako, a huge white dragon coiling behind him, and a large white tiger standing ready, both appearing before a line of armed soldiers. And suddenly the full power of his companions is revealed. The colossal turtle Jinbu joins them. Serafina sits on the back of the white tiger Bayako, and the assembled group faces the soldiers smeared with tar, who can only stand and watch, stunned by this display of power. Among the soldiers steps forward a man with a goatee named Eisenkraut, forcing a smile on his face. He says he never thought he would see such a thing in his lifetime. Klaus turns back anxiously, a drop of sweat rolling down his face. He realizes the matter is far from simple. Eisen's face grows sterner as he calls himself the shogun of the nation's army and declares that his position does not allow him to stand aside. Addressing Klaus directly, Klaus responds by raising a shining magical crest that reveals the names of his abilities Limit Break and Divine Awakening. With a determined look, Eisen formally requests a duel to test Klaus's strength. His resolve hardens, and Klaus looks him in the eyes and declares that he accepts the challenge. In the large courtyard, the duel is about to begin. Klaus and Eisenkraut stand opposite each other surrounded by terrelled soldiers, and Eisen smirks confident that with the demon emperor on their side, victory is already in the bag. Suddenly Klaus shouted, looking surprised with wide-open eyes, and Eisen tells him to stop daydreaming and get to work. Against the backdrop of the echoes of the guards' battle, Eisen apologizes and says he is too nervous to calm down, and Klaus quietly agrees he feels the same way. He laughs loudly at what Klaus says, then declares, if Klaus follows him, victory will be theirs. He continues, noting that Klaus seems shy, but that doesn't matter. From now on, he says, we are comrades. Klaus looks on, a little stunned by the man's exuberant energy. Then he asks if Klaus has a weapon, and Klaus replies that he himself is the weapon. Interested, Eisen wonders if he is a martial arts master or a sorcerer, and suggests fighting with bare hands. Without saying a word, he lunged forward, swinging a wooden training sword that came down with incredible force, completely catching Klaus by surprise. Klaus dodges with incredible speed. The wooden sword breaks on the ground, and he catches a fragment right out of the air, surrounded by amazed looks, and Klaus realizes that the opponent has already noticed the secret on his palm, that he is not a sorcerer. He desperately looks for a gap, but the opponent relentlessly swings the wooden sword, forcing him to keep his distance. The wooden blade cuts through the air. Eisen asks why he doesn't use magic. The question catches Klaus off guard. He realizes that Eisen is deliberately trying to prevent him from casting any spell. But as soon as he moved, the flat part of the blade struck him right in the back. The blow stunned him, and he sharply felt. He was cut, blood is flowing. He clutches his chest and marvels at the incredible speed of his own healing. The deep wound has already healed. But despite this advantage, he understands that there is no clear pattern in Eisen's attacks that could be exploited. The opponent notices his rapid healing, observes how quickly he recovered, and with a glance and a smile, makes it clear that fighting and healing at the same time is not easy, and meanwhile intensifies the pressure. He knows that pushing the body to the limit during recovery will only cause it to break, so he needs to finish the fight before he inflicts even more injuries on himself. Above his chest, a magical symbol flickers dimly as he prepares his next move. Dodging another powerful swing, Eisen admitted again how hard it was for him, and Klaus, unafraid, placed his hand on the ground beneath it. A complex magical circle unfolded, and he announced his next strike. Eisen, he is faster. He unleashes a destructive technique, the Thunder God's Strike, a powerful blow pierced by lightning. At that very moment, Klaus's spell activates, exploding into a huge wall of jagged eyes that meets the electric strike head-on. As the clash of lightning and ice subsides, Klaus strikes the ground with his hand fiercely. The magical symbol flashes brightly, and he casts the spell Absolute Blood Zero, commanding the moisture in the soil to freeze instantly. The magic worked instantly. Eisen looked down in surprise and saw his legs surrounded by sharp ice shards. He was trapped. He realized he was caught, and at that moment Klaus lunged forward. He rapidly closes the distance. A sphere of crackling magical energy ignites in his open palm. The target is immobilized, and he declares that he arrived just in time. He pushes the sphere of power straight into Eisen's chest. The strike is fierce, and through clenched teeth Klaus confirms that his opponent has lost consciousness. The blow threw Eisen backward. He fell onto the dusty ground. His sword clattered nearby. Klaus stands over him, gasping from exertion, and victory is on his side. From the side, Sakura Ferris looks stunned and cannot believe her eyes. She whispered both sentences and summarized the names, unable to comprehend that the duel ended just like that. The surrounding soldiers are also shocked, but they rise, refusing to surrender. They proudly call themselves Reynolds's soldiers and swear to fight to the last. Klaus interrupts them, shouting to stop. warning that they cannot withstand the white tigers. His words are cut off as Eisen rises, clutching his head and complaining of a headache, and Klaus freezes in astonishment, unable to believe that someone could recover so quickly on their own. He cannot believe his eyes when Eisenkraut appears before him. As if recovered again, the warrior turns his back and says he has lost the will to continue the fight. He sighs, looking at his man fallen to the ground. The difference in their strength, he admits, was absolute. Nearby, Sakura looks at him with a worried expression. Turning his gaze back to the opponent, he formally asked and ordered his soldiers to cease the attack to resolve the situation peacefully. House froze in silence. The sudden turn of events threw him off balance, and the little white tiger nearby only confirmed that nothing had happened to them at all. Gratitude flashed across Eisen's face. He thanks them, then begins to explain the true goal of the Demon Emperor to transform Terald into a peaceful country. His words resonated with Klaus. He recalled that it all started with Rahaku wanting to change the country for the good of its people. Gazen's face became thoughtful as he continued. He believes that the prince, capable of moving the Demon Emperor, would surely create a wonderful nation. Having made a decision, he turned to the gathered soldiers of Terald, raised his hand, and powerfully addressed the people of Linalt, swearing loyalty to Prince Rahaku and recognizing him as the new king. He knelt down in the grass. The oath was given. Before Klaus, he solemnly introduced himself as Eisenkraut, putting his life on the line and swearing allegiance to him. Klaus, confused, asked if he was really sure. Eisen confirmed with a calm smile, and this statement caused a whisper of surprise among the watching crowd. Then he shifted attention to the next task and explained with a passionate voice that now they needed to win the hearts of the soldiers. He officially asked Klaus to lend his strength to Prince Rahaku. Meanwhile, Prince Rahaka trained with fierce determination. His blade flashed, cutting down one wooden target after another in a wild whirl of movement. He drove himself to exhaustion, feeling that he had reached the limit of his strength. Yet he still decided to go further. He was led by the memory of his deceased parents and a sincere desire to change the country for the sake of the people. A sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Asrabakaka shouted, demanding silence, stating that the Guardian's affairs had nothing to do with this place, and mockingly added that for a woman from Xenofolia, just hiding was pathetic. He directed his harsh words to Rahaku, asking if he truly understood the enormous responsibility of being a keeper, then glanced at Sakura. He recognized her as a member of the most beautiful ducal house of Xenofolia, one of the 4 great ducal houses, and noticed the mighty divine protection of a great saint accompanying her. Rahaku turned to Sakura with a heavy expression and said that if they were defeated now, they would definitely be expelled as incapable kings. Sakura lowered her eyes and admitted that she did not know how serious everything was because no one had ever told her about it. His gaze shifted to Asrabakaka. Rahaku said he did not expect forgiveness, but was ready to defend Sakura even if he had to borrow power from Klaus, and Asrabakaka's face twisted with rage. He replied that this was exactly why Rahaku could not be forgiven. With a rough guttural curse, he drew a sinisterly curved blade, and its polished surface gleamed dazzlingly as he swung it forward. He pressed the cold steel to Rahaku's throat, eyes wide with fury. He growled that Rahaku's mistake was to trust him and allow him to live, but Rahaku met his gaze without flinching. Without flinching, Rahaku quietly uttered a single serious apology. He stood completely still, accepting the threat while Robakaka loomed over him, the blade of constant deadly pressure. A sudden memory broke his stillness, a vision of his mother, her warm, smiling face looking at him when he was a child. The memory strengthened his resolve. Sakura looked worried, and in Rahaku's eyes burned a new desire. He silently made an unshakable vow to protect this country. He did not flinch when we robbed the Katka. With a fierce cry, someone swung a blade, the weapon cutting through the air, leaving an icy trail, but Rahaku's gaze remained calm and his determination unbreakable. In sudden darkness, a heavy, damp blow rolled out. It was the result of his determination. Snow is falling, and above the tall pagoda, fireworks explode, a sign of the end of the conflict. On the balcony below, Eisenkraut cannot hide his amazement at the icy magic he just witnessed, while Klaus quietly contemplates the words of Prince Rahaku. He manifests another power, casting an additional healing spell that grows in the form of a bright, intricate rune. Eisenkraut froze in disbelief, realizing he was witnessing the true might of the Demon Lord, as the blue dragon, previously frozen in ice, begins to thaw. Nearby Jinbu's small companion, he turns his gaze to the others and officially asks General Eisen and Sakura to accompany him. On the highest tier of a pagoda, the group watched as the healed blue dragon finally soared freely into the sky, while far below, inside the building, Asurabikaka still knelt on the floor, broken in defeat. The crisis was just averted, and Eisenkraut returns to Prince Rahaku with a heavy, grim expression, directly asking if he was the one who overthrew the king. Haku admits that he was convinced by the Demon Lord, says he understood that the king no longer cares about our country, and apologizes for not reporting this earlier. Lying on the floor, the American robber Kaka humbly says his mother taught him both icy magic and swordsmanship, but he admits he was unlucky to encounter the refined skills of an opponent he could not match. Determination in Rahaku hardens. He places his hand on his heart and proclaims that from now on he will change the country. Klaus, looking at him, confirms his loyalty as long as the prince's feelings remain unchanged. His own will not change either. Izen firmly shakes Rahaku's hand, determination on his face. Rahaku says that for the future of the country, Izen must follow him as King Rahaku, and Izen, without hesitation, agrees. He turns his attention to Klaus and Sakura and asks them to listen to his wishes regarding the soldiers. Klaus, with a neutral expression, asks what he intends to do now. Rahaku admits to Aizen that changing the entrenched mindset of the people will not be easy, and Aizen agrees, acknowledging that it will surely be a long and difficult path. Despite the difficulties, Sakura suddenly turns around and says in a firm voice that they have no choice, they must do it, and Rahaku shouts her name, surprised by her determined cry. Determination seems to ignite Rahaku. He looks at her, his voice passionate with fervor, and asks, "Will you stay by my side to create a nation together where everyone can live freely?" Watching this exchange, Klaus smiles broadly. He says that his journey has finally ended and sincerely thanks them. In response, Rahaku bows deeply as a sign of gratitude. She shakes Klaus's hand and, as if giving an oath, solemnly promises to build a country where he can live freely, asking only to wait for that day. The whole group silently watches as this promise is made. He raises his gaze to the sky, a quiet understanding passing over his face. The future of the new nation is now in their hands. He did everything he could. When the blue dragon rose from the majestic Terald pagoda and flew into the distance, he felt that everything was over. From the streets below, Oraberos watched them leave and told the others that it was a magnificent battle. As the group walked on, Alpha noticed that Klaus was especially impressive. She agreed and added that it seemed he was moving even better than during their sparring. Klaus, hearing this, simply said he was glad to hear it. His little dragon, perched on his shoulder, suddenly spoke, addressing him as master, and asked for praise for his hard work. He laughed quietly and gently stroked the creature's head, but as soon as he did, the familiar's form began to crack and crumble, its body dissolved into particles of light, and in the other hand, a dark crystalline object pulsed. The sudden disappearance stunned his companions, and Alfred and Shia shouted his name in fright. A burst of energy surged through Klaus and threw him backward, but instead of falling, he landed directly on the back of the now full-sized blue dragon, which appeared in a flash, and looking at his hands, he smiled in surprise. In another place, a young woman named Luna held a similar crystal, her eyes wide open with anxiety. Before her and another woman, Nina, appeared a vision of a blue dragon with a rider, and Luna explained that this was a memory of their sacred beasts after the death of a man named Cecil, begging Nina to remember. In the memory, the man known as Cecil froze, not believing his eyes. He realized that Luna and Nina were the daughters of him and Marin, and how much they had grown. But the shock quickly turned to horror when he saw the sacred beast Kylin writhing in agony, distorted by the dark influence of Ouroboros, and in despair he shouted its name. Luna explained that they had no other choice, they had to act instead of their father. She then asked the question hanging in the air. "Cecil is dead, isn't he?" Before he could comprehend this, Nina declared with grim determination that Luna was now to become the next great saint of Cynofolia. He then understood. Their parents would never be informed that the world of Ouroboros had broken. It was their duty, the role passed to the next generation, to seal Ouroboros inside their mother, and the burden of this hereditary load fell on his shoulders. Nina asked her sister to convey their love to her future husband and children, but Luna shouted in protest, rejecting the title of great saint. Stunned, she called her elder sister, her voice breaking with pain. Retreating in grief, the distorted Kylin lunged forward, his figure twisted by dark energy, while Mina still called her sister's name, her voice ringing with desperate pleading. In response to the attack, Luna did not retreat. She firmly placed her hand on the beast's head and unleashed a powerful technique, the Eternal Seal. The seal took hold, the Marin's fading magic left the distorted creature, and it began to dissolve, and from the remnants of the essence, Luna's own power gave birth to a new, purified Kylin, small and flawless. The vision shattered and Klaus jerked awake in bed, gasping for air. He looked up at the wooden ceiling, the vivid memory still echoing in his mind, and at the foot of the bed, his little dragon familiar slept peacefully, undisturbed. He wakes to the chirping of birds, opens his eyes in bed, sunlight streams through the window, and it dawns on him. Morning, and probably his companions brought him here. Looking aside, he sees his little companions Kylin, Ouroboros, and the little dragon resting on the blanket beside him. When a pitcher with water is placed on the nightstand, he quietly whispers a word of thanks to them all. He swallows a sip of water, his mind racing, a drop of sweat shining on his forehead. he tries to cope with the mad wave of information that flooded him in dreams. Thoughts again returned to Luna's vision, and now he clearly saw the truth. The current Kylin was not the true companion of Marin, but a successor who inherited the power to wield the holy sword just like Luna, and everything turned out to be completely different from what he had imagined. The memory of the daughters standing before the distorted beast instilled in him a bitter truth. The power of Ouroboros was too great. Even with Kylin, it could never be sealed forever. This generational task was not heroic, it was an endless chain of human sacrifices. He clenches his teeth, understanding the terrible cycle. Every time Ouroboros resurrects, the saints are forced to seal it again, falling in the process, so that the next generation takes their place. They were destined to fall again and again, but they never gave up. The name Ouroboros echoes in his head with new hatred. His hand clenches into a fist, fierce determination burns in his eyes. He swears that he will finally defeat it, but his thoughts instantly return to the present. How much does Selena know? He questions her intentions. Did Selena know about his past when she asked him to help find Kylin? He wonders if her mother was also a saint caught in the same tragic cycle. The burden of his past, embodied in memories of Luna and the true Kylin, weighs on him. He runs out of the room, the revelation about Kylin still buzzing in his head, and craving answers, rushes down the corridor, sharply knocks on the door and calls Selena. But the room is empty. Selena stands silently somewhere else in the dense forest, from where the city and the nearby coast are visible. You find her there, shout her name as he rushes through the trees. Selena turns to him with a knowing smile and tells him to keep his eyes open, adding that he has finally awakened, and as she speaks, a small round device in her hand clicks and closes. Somewhere far away, a similar device begins to ring, and Karen Finley stands on a sunny street. Her face suddenly becomes anxious as she looks at the communicator in her hands. The device is still signaling on the nightstand beside the empty, neatly made bed. Holding it, Karen aloud wonders why her brother has not woken up yet. She presses the communicator tightly to her chest. Her eyes close in silent longing. She longs to see him, her beloved Klaus. The critical time for their reunion is approaching. Fowl addressed the companions, his voice sharp with impatience. He said they would not return. The Sinfolia forest, through which they had to go, was already near rental. Brushing off the subordinates' concerns about the magical transfer device, he declared that he would resolve it by force. The path through the forest opens onto a wide clearing. Before them emerges an astonishing find. Ancient stone ruins, half swallowed by the gnarled roots of huge trees. The men stop and ask what this place is, and one simply nods and says, ruins. They had not yet managed to explore further when two wolf-like beasts with spiky crests along their backs emerged from the underbrush, their growls echoing across the clearing. Unafraid, Fall turned to them with an irritated look, as if asking whether they really wanted to challenge him. He does not give them time to respond. With a scream, Fowl releases a tornado flame, summoning a fierce vortex that devours beasts and tears trees and soil from the ground. A mighty whirlpool bursts directly into the ancient ruins with devastating force, while its companions, standing at a safe distance, only watch in shock as the stone entrance begins to crack and crumble under this magical pressure. The stone yields a palpable, ominous presence covers the clearing. Fowl breaks out in a cold sweat, eyes wide open from growing terror, recognizes this feeling as deep evil, an aura he has never felt before, and his companions share this horror, frozen in place. Their fear is instantly justified. A stream of pure dark energy bursts from the broken door, the ground shakes, a sinister roar sounds, run, and three men turn and desperately rush to the safe shade of the trees. Far from the chaos in the forest, Serafina sits by Klaus's bed and gently asks where his mother is, and Klaus, with pain on his face, confesses, "The parents are no longer here, it's because of my weakness," clenches his fist, and with a voice breaking with sorrow, says that their sacrifice forces him to keep going. Serafina thanked with relief he had diagnosed her, but her thoughts had already darted to another. In the chest secretly lay Kylan's reserve of strength, which she had not managed to protect in time for the sake of her native homeland. Her face tightened with determination. She declared that she would use her scales and make sure Karen got them, shouting her name Selena, as if sealing her intent. Hearing this, Klaus rushed through the forest to her, his eyes wide with the horror approaching, and he shouted, demanding to know the true face of Kylin, for he already suspected the terrible truth. She turned to him, her face sullen, and confirmed his worst fears. She admitted that he had figured out the true form of Kylin was the embodiment of generations of saints who came one after another. She explained that the saints sacrificed their bodies to seal the demon lord Ouroboros, and Kylin is the result of that final sacrifice. This revelation suddenly stunned Klosh froze and could not utter a word. With a heavy heart, she then confessed that she too would take the same path. A gloomy silence fell between them, and they silently walked further through the forest. He suddenly stopped her, grabbed her hand in despair, reminded her that he chose to save her and would not allow her to ruin her life as his father did, and sharply demanded to know if she had any idea of the pain of those left behind. His words shook her, but her determination only grew stronger. She sharply replied that she had no reason to become a support for others, and that Karen would never have wanted that, and her voice, raised by emotion, sounded firm. Her only true wish was for Karen to become his real family, and she would achieve this at any cost. The hand was still in his palm, but his attention scattered as the ground began to tremble fiercely. A massive dark cross-shaped structure burst from beneath the earth, throwing Klaus and Serafina off balance, and he shouted her name. When the trembling subsided, Serafina sharply whistled. In the distance, a giant column of black energy shot upward, and below Klaus and his companions stood frozen in shock, calling Serafina and Karen. Their screams were born of terror, and elsewhere another young woman cried out in alarm. A stony texture was rapidly spreading over her hands. Petrification was advancing too quickly. Seeing the dark energy in the distance, Klaus shouted Serafina's name and realized with horror that he would not be able to stop what she had planned. He stretched out his hand, shouting for her to wait, but a powerful ring-shaped shockwave of energy burst out from there and threw him back in the air. When he was abandoned, one unbearable question surfaced in his mind. Was it right to lose Serafina just to heal Karen? He clenched his fist in the air, determination hardened within him. He refused to accept such a choice. He will save them both. Meanwhile, Serafina stood before her comrades and explained that the Kylani had supported the barrier for generations, but now its condition had become unstable. She turned to them with a calm smile and thanked them for everything, gave the last order to throw Kylin and rushed to take him to Karen and Klaus. As she spoke, a mythical beast appeared, now wrapped in a terrifying black flame. From afar, Klaus burst through the door, shouting Karen's name. He found her lying on the stone floor, and moaning. The strange, scaly pattern of her curse had spread further up her arms and legs. Karen's consciousness fades, she struggles with pain, and Klaus leans over her, desperately trying to make her recognize him. Seeing that she is losing consciousness, he begs her to hold on and endure what is about to happen. He places his hand on her chest, and suddenly, a shining magical circle materializes. Karen screams in pain as the energy flows into her, and he watches in horror as the power of the blue dragon is absorbed into her at an alarming speed. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave of dark energy bursts nearby, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. He and Serafina turn in horror toward the source of the explosion. Before them stand two monstrous shadow creatures wrapped in black flames, and Serafina whispers one terrible word, Oraberos. When the distorted Kylin roars, Serafina's face hardens with grim determination. She grits her teeth and aloud asks how much longer Oraberos intends to torment them. Her thoughts drift to a memory of a grassy field. She calls for her mother, and sadness is heard in her voice as she confesses how long and hard it was to be alone. Standing on the back of a giant monster, she recalls her mother's faith that Klaus will save Karen and the whole world. Once she too dreamed of that peaceful world, but now she clenches her fists and says it's her turn to act. Her little dragon appeared and warned her not to be reckless. There is almost no time left. Ignoring the pleas, Serafina silently asks Klaus to hold on a little longer, and as her own world fades to black, Karen's last thought is a painful regret. She wanted to marry Klaus. She raises her eyes to Klaus, her voice quiet but firm, asking him to be happy. His eyes widen in despair, and he shouts that he would do anything for her, even marry her. He tightly squeezes her hand, but she gently pulls it away. On her open palm, a complex magical sign begins to glow brightly. Their eyes widen, and shock from the sudden surge of power is reflected on their faces. "I will save you now," Klaus exclaimed, and hope shone again in his voice. Meanwhile, Serafina gathers her mighty power. Dark, feathery energy explodes around her, and holding a shining artifact aloft, she summons the Eternal Seal. The effect is instantaneous. Blinding light envelops Klaus and Karen as she forcibly restores magical power, and with grim determination, she pours her life force into the spell, ready to risk everything for those she loves most. Klaus holds his sister in his arms, his face twisted with despair. He shouts for her to live. A dazzling light burst from his palm as he pressed his hand to her chest and invoked a powerful ability, forced magic restoration. His eyes widen as another voice echoes in his mind, a foreign memory. He sees Serafina telling Raktius to pull himself together, asking why Lumil acts this way, and saying that they are an obstacle that should be driven from the Holy Land into the demon world. The foreign memory stunned him. His mind raced, trying to understand what he had just seen. Looking at the motionless Karen, he wondered whose memories these could be. He knelt over her, and a dark, miasmatic energy drew out from her body, dissolving before his eyes into nothingness. The ominous pattern on Karen's chest completely disappears. She moans softly, and Klaus calls her by name, his voice full of disbelief. Her eyes slowly open. She looks up confused and, seeing her brother, quietly whispers his name, almost as a question. Relief washed over him. He pulled her into a desperate embrace, tears of joy rolling down his face as he called her name. He had managed to heal her. She returns the hug, tears flowing on their own. She whispers that everything is fine. She believed he would heal her, apologizes for making him worry, and with a smile says he is the best older brother. She whispered with closed eyes, a light blush appearing on her cheeks. She wanted to marry Klaus. He froze in surprise, his face reddened, and he could not tell if these were her true feelings. Shock recedes, replaced by sharp panic. He turns to the swordswoman with the scythe and shouts that he must tell everyone Selena risks her life to seal Kylin and save Karen. The swordswoman grabs his hand and begs him not to go, but he breaks free and demands an explanation of what she means. He pushes away, insisting he must go and stop her, explaining that although Karen's curse is lifted, that alone is not enough. Seeing his unwavering determination, the swordswoman's expression softens into reluctant agreement. With her permission, Klaus raises his fist and shouts the name, Ronald, to perform the transfer. Somewhere in the forest, dotted with sunspots, Seraphina with 2 guards confronts the mythical beast Kylin. Behind them appears a huge shadow creature, its presence pressing on the temples, and while Seraphina asks about their intentions, one of the guards shouts in despair that sealing the beast is impossible. A shadow creature looms over her, but Seraphina calmly addresses it. She says she saw a black mist that seems to have interfered with the seal. Her words instantly turned the guards' faces into masks of horror. They realized she was trying to take Ouroboros's power, and at that moment, Klaus and the swordswoman with braided hair appeared and he shouted, Selena. The sudden appearance surprised the swordswoman. She looks at him confused, not understanding why he is here and why he calls her Karen. He ignores her, rushes past to Seraphina, and exclaims with relief that he made it in time. He appears at the last moment and assures the stunned Seraphina that he healed her, and now everything is fine. When she quietly whispers thanks, her gaze slips to Karen, and she firmly grabs the swordswoman's hand. Karen turns sharply, her voice sharp with anger and anxiety. She calls Seraphina a fool, reproaches her for constantly giving her body, and strictly forbids her to ever do that again. She grabs Seraphina by the shoulders, pain on her face, and says she will never forgive such recklessness. Seraphina only looks back, embarrassed and apologetic. The anger recedes and she tightly embraces Seraphina, though scolding her. She whispers a sincere, thank you, and admits how much she means to her. Meanwhile, Seraphina's guards turn to Klaus for answers. One, worried, asks what is happening and notices that her seal is not working, while the other immediately names the cause. The black mist of Ouroboros is interfering and preventing her from completing the ritual. Taking command, Klaus ordered the guards not to stop controlling the barrier's movements, then entrusted Seraphina with protecting Karen, and Karen is to restrain the mythical beast Kylin inside the same barrier. Everyone agreed. Heron immediately began the dance of the burning sword, engulfing the blade in flames and rushing towards the monster. Klaus happily noticed that she had fully recovered and fights confidently and skillfully. Having subdued the immediate threat, he directs his gaze at the mighty Kylin. New determination tightens his face, and he silently vows to save both himself and the beast. He looks anxiously as Seraphina and Karen unleash their attacks, which the mythical beast Kylin dodges lethally, and suddenly realizes that the creature is not just dodging, it is actively searching for a weak spot in the barrier they built. The beast finds what it was looking for and breaks through the barrier with a powerful strike. Klaus desperately shouts its name. As if his plea was heard, 3 more sacred beasts appear in the sky: the white tiger, the Jinbu, and the blue dragon, and with renewed hope he calls everyone. In response, the blue dragon let out a powerful roar that rolled across the entire field. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Klaus placed his hand on Kylin. A magical mark glowed in his palm, and he began scanning, feeling that the beast's consciousness was already fading into darkness. The connection suddenly and brutally breaks. Kylin falls and, stumbling, steps back. Karen and Seraphina see that the beast has lost consciousness, and when it comes to, Klaus is stunned to realize that the flow of magic in Kylin is completely different from what he felt in Karen. Dark aura exploded around the unconscious Kylin. His power was forcibly and brutally being restored. He froze, unable to do anything, and notices a clear resemblance between Kylin and the blue dragon. Seraphina asks what they should do. Then the blue dragon addresses Klaus directly, suggesting that the master's power might not be enough, possibly because he himself is not sufficiently trained. He listened as the blue dragon explained that something was wrong. Kylin's magic was probably incomplete. The white tiger intervened, insisting that once Kylin's memories return, his magic will become perfect. Nearby, Karen begged him to go and save the beast. Meanwhile, Seraphina knelt beside the others by Kylin. Her face full of anxiety, she decided she would not let her mother see the sacred creature in such a weakened state. Klaus's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. He called her by name, his fist clenched with determination, and he declared that he himself would end this curse. He turned to his companions and announced that he was heading to the city of Thousandless. Serafina's guards immediately promised to accompany him, and Karen insisted on going too. Then Klaus addressed the sacred beasts and entrusted them with taking care of Kylin. The blue dragon entrusted Jinbu and the white tiger to settle matters there, and the tiger nodded in understanding. Karen settled behind Klaus, and he shouted to the dragon to wait until it began to rise. Far away across the endless desert, the city of Thousandless towered on the horizon, and a majestic firebird was flying towards it, a crimson bird. On the ground below, Alfred and Shia watched in horror as it approached. A drop of sweat rolled down Alfred's temple as he, seeing its incredible size, recognized it as Suzaku, the last of the sacred beasts, and aloud asked why it had finally appeared in their city. Suddenly he remembered that Klaus's squad had gone to a similar place, and anxiety grew. There was no contact with Serafina, and rumors were spreading about Siku's sudden rampage. Turning to Shui, he asked what they should do next. He and Shia watched as a burly man named Raki appeared before them, and another with dark hair announced their goal: to become a shield and hold the position until the demon emperor appeared. Raki instantly charged into attack, his spear aimed at the colossal, cinnabar-spotted bird. He swore to protect this land at the cost of his own life. Below the battle, Klaus and Karen sat on their small dragon, their goal clear: to release the last sacred beast.